Chapter 683. An auspicious sign, or more accurately, a strange cat with wings, floated in the air with its eyes slightly closed. Sucking in a breath of cold air, Lin Yi and Biluo looked at each other, their expressions extremely shocked. "Are you sure this is really an auspicious sign?" Lin Yi frowned slightly and said in shock, "An auspicious sign is actually a cat. I've never seen an auspicious sign before," Biluo sighed. "From the looks of it, this little guy is very likely to be a true auspicious sign. Its body contains the power of 7 types of laws. Although it's still in a deep sleep, it has unlimited possibilities. How can an ordinary cat have this kind of aptitude? Phew, this is too shocking." Lin Yi held his forehead and sighed helplessly. "In this case, even if I bring it out and hand it over to the Academy, I'm afraid the Academy won't believe that this is an auspicious sign, right?" "Probably," Biluo spread out her hands. "After all, there's still the power of laws in its body." "Awoof!" Suddenly, a wolf howl sounded, startling Lin Yi and Biluo. This was the ninefold space. How could there be a wolf howl? Looking around, Lin Yi and Biluo's expressions became more and more awkward in the next moment. That strange cat opened its eyes, waved its 2 little paws, and let out a wolf howl. Its big sparkling eyes stared at Lin Yi. Is this a cat or a wolf?" Lin Yi looked confused. What was going on? If it was a cat, why was it howling like a wolf? Auspicious signs are really unpredictable. Biluo was also stunned. She carefully sized up that strange cat for a moment and said in a low voice, "Although it's very strange, its identity as an auspicious sign is definitely real. It's just born and already has the strength close to the great sage's realm. It's not bad." Hearing this, Lin Yi finally noticed the strange cat's strength, and his expression suddenly became serious. "It's just been born, and its strength isn't inferior to mine. I believe that it's an auspicious sign. Unless it's a divine item, how could there be such an opportunity?" Lin Yi smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that the auspicious sign of the entire continent was actually a strange cat. If word got out, wouldn't this be too much of a fantasy? Even if Lin Yi brought the strange cat out and openly told others that the strange cat was an auspicious sign, no one would believe him. At this moment, after auspicious luck let out that wolf howl, it fell into a deep sleep again. It was especially sweet. Obviously, it was not wary of Lin Yi and Biluo. Seeing this, Lin Yi placed the auspicious sign under the chaotic divine tree. He sat beside the divine tree and looked at the increasingly vast origin heavenly water with great satisfaction. This time, his strength had improved, and he hadn't made any mistakes in the ninefold space. It could be said that he had gained a lot. For the rest of the time, focus on sensing the power of laws. Once you break through to the great sage realm, your strength can leap again. Biluo looked at Lin Yi, her eyes filled with jealousy. To be able to comprehend the power of laws when he just entered the great sage, he was absolutely a 1-in-a-million existence. Lin Yi was rather convinced by Biluo and sat cross-legged under the chaotic divine tree without the slightest hesitation, sensing the power of heaven and earth's laws. 3 days later, in the spacetime hole, Flawless White was like a statue, standing at the entrance. Buzz! Suddenly, light flickered. A figure appeared at the entrance of the cave. Lightly exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, that figure opened both eyes. Divine light immediately bloomed in his eyes, resplendent and dazzling. Even Flawless White turned his head slightly, not daring to look. "Little guy, looks like you recovered pretty well." Flawless White laughed lightly. After the light dissipated, he sized up Lin Yi. At the same time, Lin Yi's soul quietly awoke. Rumble! Crackle! Almost the moment Lin Yi woke up, dark clouds gathered in the sky, thunder raged, lightning flashed, as if a heavenly tribulation had descended. "What's going on?" Flawless White frowned slightly and hurriedly looked up. After realizing that it was a thunder tribulation, he let out a sigh of relief. Although the thunder tribulation was terrifying, he did not need to worry with the Supreme around. Tsk. How long has it been since there was a thunder tribulation in Cebu Gakuen? How dare it appear here? Courting death? With a sneer, Flawless White suddenly thought of something, and the expression on his face froze. The corner of his mouth twitched. Flawless White sized up Lin Yi carefully, and could not help but gasp. In his memory, before Lin Yi entered the space-time hole, he was clearly a mid-stage saint, and his divine sense was only at level 38. Only 3 days had passed. Even with the help of the space-time hole, it had only been 30 days. How could Lin Ye's realm have broken through so much? Shaking his head violently, Flawless White was shocked by a junior for the first time. His mouth was wide open, and he was shocked. As far as they knew, space-time treasures could not be stacked. In other words, Lin Yi had cultivated for 30 days at most. Not only had his divine sense completely recovered, but he had also broken through to level 59, and his martial arts cultivation had broken through 3 levels in a row, reaching the peak of the invincible saint realm. This was simply unbelievable. Hiss! No wonder there was a thunder tribulation. With such fast progress, could it be that he has obtained another divine item? The corner of his mouth twitched. Flawless White swallowed a mouthful of saliva. When he thought that Lin Yi had obtained 2 divine items in a row and could even obtain auspicious signs, he felt relieved. Wasn't it just breaking through a few levels in a row? If Lin Yi was lucky enough to obtain the moon god's blessing, even if Lin Yi drank a mouthful of water and directly became a heavenly saint or an absolute saint, Flawless White would not be surprised. Rumble! Flawless White felt relieved, but it did not mean that the lightning in the sky would feel relieved. Lin Ye's speed of breaking through was too fast. 3 types of space-time powers were added to him, and it could not hide the secrets of heaven. The violent lightning gathered, and there was a kind of aura that would not stop until one of them was dead. The aura of this lightning doesn't seem to be from the saint realm? At this time, Flawless White also noticed that something was wrong with the lightning. Vaguely, the lightning actually had a power that made him feel lingering fear. Crackle! Violent lightning suddenly appeared, and the light blue lightning was like a dragon. It suddenly fell and struck toward Lin Yi. The dragon's roar reverberated in the entire space. For a moment, Lin Yi and Flawless White both took a few steps back and looked at the lightning in horror. Especially Lin Yi. When he woke up, he almost cursed out loud. It was fine if there was a lightning tribulation, but he was only in the saint realm. What was the meaning of a lightning tribulation that even peak heavenly saints were afraid of? This was simply not giving him a way out. Not to mention Lin Yi, even Flawless White was very depressed. What did Lin Yi do to attract such a level of lightning tribulation? Rumble! The lightning was extremely fast. In just 2 breaths, it enlarged in Lin Yi and Flawless White's eyes. Its power was even more piercingly cold, as if it would explode on their bodies at any time. However, just as the lightning was about to fall, a strange wave exploded. In the next moment, the lightning was like snow meeting the scorching sun, disappearing without a trace. End of chapter. Chapter 684. Phew! Flawless White heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the lightning dissipate. This was the space-time hole. What was there to worry about with the supremacy here? Even the lightning of the absolute saint realm couldn't hurt them at all in front of the supremacy. However, Flawless White was shocked when he thought that the lightning tribulation was triggered by Lin Yi. His mouth twitched as he stared at Lin Yi. Cough, cough. Lin Yi was under a lot of pressure when he was stared at by Flawless White. He coughed awkwardly. Hiss! Flawless White grinned and said, "Little guy, what did you do to trigger such a powerful lightning tribulation?" Lin Yi was about to reply when Flawless White interrupted him. He shook his head and flew away with Lin Yi. This time, they weren't in a hurry. Lin Yi had recovered from his injuries, so there was no need to worry. Flawless White didn't fly too fast and floated in the air slowly. Little guy, you're already very powerful to be able to recover your divine will in such a short time. I didn't expect you to make such a big breakthrough. Oh, did you get the moon god's blessing when you absorbed the moon droplet? Flawless White asked curiously. In his opinion, it was impossible for such a thing to happen unless it was the moon god's blessing. The moon god's blessing? Lin Yi exclaimed. He just remembered that he had been cultivating crazily after absorbing the moon droplet. He even forgot to check if he had received the moon god's blessing. With a thought, Lin Yi hastily woke Bai Luo up and examined her body. However, Biluo's words poured cold water on Lin Yi. Don't think about it. If you had received the moon god's blessing, I would have sensed it. You're already very lucky. If you could receive the moon god's blessing, how could others live? Bai Luo didn't reply. She didn't want to bother with Lin Yi. Lin Ye's luck was already very good. If he could receive the moon god's blessing, what was the point of others living? Who was Lin Ye's enemy? They might as well kill themselves. Going against Lin Yi was living in a dream. Lin Ye's mouth twitched. He looked at Flawless White and said helplessly, "It didn't awaken. Looks like my luck is too bad." Gasping, Flawless White couldn't suppress the shock in his heart. He pressed Lin Ye's shoulder and asked in surprise, "How did you break through so many realms? Or should I improve both my martial arts cultivation and my spiritual force cultivation after recovering from my spiritual force injury?" Maybe, rolling his eyes, Lin Yi chuckled and said, "The birth of auspicious signs gave me a lot of power. That's why I broke through so many realms at once." Flawless White already knew about the auspicious signs. Besides, Cebu Gakuin was interested in the auspicious signs. He could also benefit from it. Naturally, he wouldn't hide it from Flawless White. The Universe Pagoda and Ninefold Space were Lin Ye's trump cards. This is auspicious signs. The corner of Bai Wuxia's mouth twitched violently when he saw the strange cat. Flawless White took a deep breath and glanced at Lin Yi. If he did not know that Lin Yi did not like to joke, he would have slapped Lin Yi to death. Yes, this is auspicious signs. Lin Yi smiled bitterly and felt helpless. If possible, he also wanted the auspicious signs to change forms. Even a tiger, a qilin, or a giant dragon would be better than a strange cat with wings. Poochie! Poochie! The strange cat seemed to have noticed Lin Yi and the others' gazes. It flapped its wings and made a crisp sound. Its eyes were still closed, and its breathing was calm. It was still sleeping. Newborn spirit beasts had to sleep for a period of time to accumulate the energy needed for their survival. The stronger they were, the longer they would sleep. Even the auspicious signs were no exception. What a surprise! The auspicious signs are actually cats that can fly? Flawless White was so surprised that his mouth almost fell open when he sensed the power of law in the strange cat's body. Flawless White kept patting his head with his hand, looking confused. What was going on? He was more surprised today than in the past year. End of chapter. Chapter 685. After all, Flawless White and the Great Lord were both top powers. They quickly noticed the strange cat's abnormality and acknowledged its identity. Although they acknowledged it, they were still surprised. Anyone who thought of the auspicious sign on the mainland would think of a Kirin or a giant dragon. Even a lion would be fine. What was a cat trying to do? Was it trying to act cute? TSK. The auspicious sign has yet to fully awaken. Take good care of it. The Great Lord shook his head and disappeared from Lin Yi and Flawless White's sight in a flash. Originally, the Great Lord wanted to examine the auspicious sign carefully. If he could find something special about the auspicious sign, he might be able to surpass the shackles of his realm. However, the auspicious sign's status made him give up on the idea. He could see that there was nothing special about the auspicious sign. The only thing worth mentioning was that it was born with the strength of the great sage realm and contained the power of order in its body. However, this was far from enough for the great lord. Therefore, he chose to continue cultivating and left the auspicious sign in Lin Ye's care. When the auspicious sign grew in the future, he would make other plans. After the great lord left, Flawless White asked curiously, "What are you going to name the auspicious sign? Also, when will it wake up?" "I don't know." Lin Yi sighed helplessly. "It's been half a year and it's still in a deep sleep." "Forget it. You should take part in the assessment and get a place to enter Sky Market." Flawless White grinned and said, "Hee, Sky Market is a good place. Although it can't improve your martial arts cultivation, it can greatly improve your spiritual power and soul power." "What exactly is Sky Market?" Hearing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but be curious. Flawless White and Theta Scarabii were both top powers. They still held Sky Market in high esteem and looked forward to it. "We'll talk about it after you get a place." "Don't tell you that you can't even get a place." Flawless White waved his hand. "I can't get a spot?" Lin Yi shrugged his shoulders and said snappily, "If I can't get a spot with my current realm, I'm afraid Auspicious will be angered to death." Before he broke through to the Saint realm, Lin Yi had already fought his way into the top 50 of the Saint transformation rankings. Now, not only had his cultivation broken through to the invincible Saint realm, the strength of his divine sense had become more than 10 times stronger than before. So, how could he possibly be unable to obtain a position? Not to mention the outer courtyard, even if it was the inner courtyard students, Lin Yi had the confidence to fight them. Cough cough. Flawless White knocked on Lin Ye's head. "You can't be so arrogant. Almost everyone in the top 20 of the Saint Transforming Board has their own method." "I'm confident." Lin Yi grinned and suddenly laughed. "Elder Bai, how about we make a bet?" "Nope." Flawless White coughed lightly. With a wave of his right hand, he rushed to the outer courtyard with Lin Yi. In less than 10 breaths of time, Lin Yi had returned to the outer courtyard. At this moment, many students in the outer courtyard turned into a torrent and rushed to the blood refinement field. Only the top 200 of the Saint Transformation Board could compete for a spot to enter the Sky Market. There were very few people competing for a spot, but every student was very concerned about it. They were unwilling to miss this grand event. It wasn't even noon yet, but the blood refinement field was already filled with students. Under Flawless White's lead, Lin Yi descended from the sky and landed on the luxurious stage in the middle. "Elder Bai! Elder Bai! You're here!" On the stage, the other elders hurriedly stood up and bowed. Then, they looked at Lin Ye's expression in shock. Although the elders knew that Lin Yi was talented, they were still shocked when they saw Flawless White personally bringing Lin Yi here. Even the elders were shocked, let alone the other students. They were all stunned. "What's going on? That elder is the outer courtyard's great elder. He actually brought a student to participate in the competition. Doesn't this mean that he has already decided on a spot?" "Internally decided my ass. That guy is the leader of this batch of new students. It's said that he entered the outer courtyard and entered the top 50 of the Saint Transformation Board. This time, he disappeared for so long. Who knows, he might really have a chance to get a spot. I never expected that a new student would have such a huge improvement." Many students were stunned, especially the older students. All of them felt extremely guilty. They had been in the outer courtyard for many years, but their strength hadn't increased by much. When Lin Yi first entered the outer courtyard, he was only a sage to be. Now, even the outer courtyard's great elder had a whole new level of respect for him. Compared to him, they were really too weak. The new students were completely excited. They constantly shouted Lin Ye's name. For a moment, the entire blood refinement ground was filled with thunderous voices. The stronger Lin Yi was, the more confident the Heavenly Rapier sect would be. Lin Yi never expected that he would be so popular. Feeling the cheers of the crowd, he recognized the Heavenly Rapier sect even more. It seems like I should visit the Heavenly Rapier sect if I have the chance. Lin Yi secretly made up his mind. He was ashamed. Ever since the Heavenly Rapier sect was established, Lin Yi had never been there. Silence. Flawless White raised his right hand. In an instant, a sound wave rippled out. It was like a huge bell that suppressed all the voices. Many students in the blood refinement ground raised their heads and stared at Flawless White. At this moment, there were still people squeezing in. Noticing this, Flawless White frowned and suddenly exhaled. In the next moment, that exhalation floated out and turned into a huge light screen. The light screen reflected the scene in the blood refinement ground. The blood refinement ground is full. The rest of the students can watch from the outside. The top 200 on the Transforming Saint list, please come up. As soon as he finished speaking, more than 100 figures leaped out at the same time and landed steadily on different arenas. The top 3 on the Transforming Saint list were all outstanding disciples of different generations. They were no longer in the outer courtyard. Among the top 10, 2 of them were mavericks and didn't come back to participate. In addition, some people knew that they couldn't obtain the qualification to enter the Sky Market and didn't want to waste time. There were only about 100 people who participated in the competition. Among them, there were only 2 new students. They were Lin Yi and Qing Yu. As for Shangguan Yunqi, Mui, and the rest, although they were talented, they couldn't compete with the top students in the outer courtyard. After everyone settled down, Flawless White's voice rang out once more. The top 10 in this competition will have the qualification to enter the Sky Market. After the final result is out, everyone will have another chance to challenge. Those who have been challenged once can reject the next challenge. Next, let's start drawing lots. As soon as Flawless White finished speaking, he waved his right hand and countless balls of light gathered in the air. End of chapter. Chapter 686. In the next moment, Lin Yi and the rest leaped up and each of them obtained a ball of light. Buzz. After obtaining the ball of light, before they landed, a ray of light shot out from the ball of light. Swish. 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 In an instant, countless rays of light intertwined. After a while, those rays of light connected everyone, and each of them had a corresponding one. The first round of the competition begins. As Flawless White's voice fell, those rays of light suddenly entangled everyone and threw them onto the arena. Lin Ye's opponent was Zhu Mingyong, whom he had defeated previously. It's you. Zhu Mingyong's mouth was slightly open, and he was stunned for a moment. Then, he laughed out loud. Just nice, since I lost to you last time, I have worked hard to cultivate. This time, I must avenge my humiliation. Avenge your humiliation? Raising his eyebrows, Lin Yi looked at Zhu Mingyong. Although his strength had stabilized, it did not increase. He could not help but laugh. In the past, Zhu Mingyong could take more than 10 moves from him. Now, Zhu Mingyong could not even take 1 move. That's right. Zhu Mingyong's face was solemn. He stomped his feet on the ground, and his entire body suddenly emitted a yellow light. Not far away, the people at the peak of the Cloud Mountain cheered for Zhu Mingyong. Of course, there were even more people cheering for Lin Yi. Their voices resounded through the sky. Heya, Overlord splitting the mountain! With a light shout, Zhu Mingyong clenched his fists and waved them continuously. A golden light flashed, and a strong force suddenly gathered in his chest. Low-grade sacred class martial skill. Raising his eyebrows, Lin Ye's shoulders shook. The destructive divine dragon transformation burst out. Violent lightning mixed with scorching flames covered Lin Ye's body. Kill! Zhu Mingyong bent his legs and pushed his fists forward. The surging force was like a gale, and it went straight for Lin Yi. Ta-ta-ta! However, in the face of such an attack, Lin Ye's expression did not change. He held his head high and his chest out, and went straight for the attack. Bang bang bang! The surging power collided with Lin Ye's chest, and an intense fluctuation immediately erupted. However, Lin Ye's figure did not move at all. He continued to walk towards Zhu Mingyong at an unhurried speed. What? Zhu Mingyong's pupils shrank as he stared at Lin Yi in shock. He didn't dare to believe that his full strength strike actually didn't do anything to Lin Yi. Phew, you weren't a match for me in the past. Now you're even less of a match. Zhu Mingyong's face warped. Before he could react, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Bang! The berserk power wreaked havoc, and Zhu Mingyong's body flew out like a cannonball. Boom, boom, boom. Zhu Mingyong's body trembled as he crashed into the arena's barrier. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. However, the pain from those injuries was nothing compared to the shock in his heart. What's the situation? How long had it been? How did Lin Yi become so strong? Not to mention Zhu Mingyong, even the elders on the grandstand were stunned. Hiss! A month ago, this little fellow was merely an intermediate saint. How did he become an invincible saint with his current strength? This little fellow couldn't have been possessed by some old fellow, right? Those elders were at least at the invincible great sage realm. The moment Lin Yi made a move, they saw through his realm. All of them were incomparably shocked as they turned their heads to look at Flawless White. Noticing this, Flawless White nodded slightly. He finally felt much better in his heart. How could he be the only one who was shocked? Don't worry, he only obtained some opportunities. It's not a possession. Flawless White smiled faintly and said in a low voice, "This year's new students are truly remarkable. How long has it been, and there are already 2 people who can make it into the top 10 of the Saint Transforming rankings. Truly impressive." Hearing this, the elders shifted their gazes to Qin Yu on the other side. This time, Qin Yu's opponent was a disciple in the top 30 of the Saint Transforming rankings. However, in front of her, he still couldn't last more than 10 moves. Hiss! It's only been less than 2 months since they entered the outer court, and there are actually 2 people with such strength. Congratulations! Hee, when the 2 of them enter the inner court, they'll definitely cause a great commotion. The elders were full of praise. Even for them, this was the first time in dozens of years that they had encountered a student as talented as Lin Yi and Qin Yu. The first round of the competition ended very quickly. Lin Yi and Qin Yu's luck wasn't bad. They didn't encounter anyone in the top 10 of the Saint Transforming rankings, nor did they encounter anyone in advance. After several rounds, there were only 20 people left in the competition. This time, each competition wasn't separated but carried out consecutively. It could be considered an eye-opener for the other students. Lin Ye's opponent was Deng Tongxian, who was ranked 17th on the Saint Transforming rankings. Coincidentally, Deng Tongxian was the second expert at the peak of Cloud Mountain. He had a grudge with the Heavenly Sword sect. Deng Tongxian, peak Saint Realm, even possessed a supreme sacred artifact. His strength was formidable, and ordinary invincible saints would not be his match. However, even so, in the hands of the Lin Yi who broke through to invincible Saint Realm, Deng Tongxian was defeated before he could even activate his supreme sacred artifact. This scene was extremely shocking in everyone's eyes. Even the powerhouse ranked 17th on the Saint Transforming rankings couldn't block one move from Lin Yi. The top 10 might not be Lin Ye's match either. Qin Yu was also stunned. She didn't expect that the Lin Yi who recovered his strength would be so powerful. The thought of originally wanting to compete with Lin Yi was completely dispelled. Deng Tongxian was defeated. Lin Ye's quota to head to Sky Market was confirmed. Next was the rest of the competition. Qin Yu's luck wasn't very good. She encountered a powerhouse ranked 10th on the Saint Transforming rankings and bitterly fought several hundred moves. In the end, she relied on the power of divine sense to gain the upper hand and successfully obtained the quota. In an instant, all the new students were ecstatic and excited. 2 new students participated in the selection of Sky Market and both obtained the quota. This was too great for their Sky Rapier sect. In the future, no one would dare to provoke them easily. As for the other forces, not to mention the powerhouses ranked 10th on the Saint Transforming rankings, even the top 20 were rare. The Sky Rapier sect had 2 of the top 10, and they had the most people. How would they dare to act recklessly? After 2 hours, the competition officially ended. 10 figures stood in the middle of the arena with their heads held high and chests puffed out, accepting the cheers of the many students. Flawless White and the other elders also nodded slightly, feeling satisfied. Next, if anyone is unconvinced and feels that their luck was bad, they have another chance to challenge. Of course, there is only one chance. If no one challenges within the time it takes to burn an incense stick, it will be counted as a forfeit. As his voice fell, the people who had been defeated earlier hesitated, constantly sizing up the 10 people in the arena. Before long, those people's gazes all landed on Qinyu, as well as the student who had just broken through to Peak Saint Realm. As for Lin Yi, they didn't even think about it. What kind of joke was this? From start to end, Lin Ye's opponent didn't even last one move. Wouldn't they be courting death if they challenged again? End of this chapter. Chapter 687. It had to be said that people always picked soft persimmons to bully. Those who had been defeated earlier all challenged Qinyu. However, they did not expect Qinyu's divine sense to be so powerful. Especially with the help of a divine sense treasure, it was not difficult for her to defeat them. After an hour, all the challenges were over. Those who had been defeated finally realized that the strength of the 10 people in the arena was indeed stronger than theirs. Seeing that no one dared to challenge again, Flawless White stroked his beard. Just as he was about to end the selection, a crisp laughter suddenly rang in everyone's ears. What's that sound? Boom, boom, boom. Surging Saint Aura surged and landed on the entire blood refinement arena like a mountain. It's him. Why did this guy suddenly come back? Feeling the Saint Aura, many elders, including Flawless White, were slightly shocked. Noticing this, Lin Yi, who was in the ring, couldn't help but be surprised. He could feel that the person who had come was only at the peak of the invincible Saint Realm. Why would the elders be surprised? Not only the elders, but many students were also very surprised. It seems that Yi Yin is here. Didn't Yi Yin go out to train? Why is he here too? Swoosh. Just as everyone was discussing, a figure quietly descended from the sky and gradually landed on the arena. Alright Yi Yin, quickly disperse your Saint Aura. Flawless White shouted in a deep voice. Elders, I trust you have been well since we last met. After landing safely, Yi Yin turned back and cupped his fists at the elders. There was no respect on his face. He smiled and said, It's just Saint Aura. Elders, why would you take it to heart? Humph. Hearing this, the elder with the calligraphy position immediately snorted. Surging power oppressed and instantly defeated Yi Yin's Saint Aura. In response, Yi Yin shrugged and did not say anything. He just turned his head to look at Lin Yi and the others. Elders, it seems that something big has happened recently. I wonder if I can join in. I just heard that you can challenge the 10 people present, right? Although Yi Yin's voice was gentle, the look in his eyes gradually became piercingly cold. After Xiao Chen spoke, aside from Lin Yi and Qinyu, the rest of the 10 people on the arena all panicked. They had all seen how powerful Yi Yin was and knew that they were no match for him. When they heard his words, they naturally became extremely nervous. This will be fun. Yi Yin is ranked 4th on the Saint Transformation Board, and his strength far surpasses the rest. If he were to make a move, one of them would definitely be eliminated. I just don't know who will be so unlucky. The numerous students began to discuss amongst themselves, pointing and whispering with strange expressions on their faces. The new students, on the other hand, had stupefied looks on their faces as they looked at Yi Yin in puzzlement. They didn't know Night Hidden's identity, so they asked the students beside them. After they found out about Yi Yin's identity, they were all shocked and worried. They were afraid that Lin Yi and Qin Yu would be picked by Yi Yin. The corners of the elders' mouths twitched as they turned to look at Flawless White. They did not want to be interrupted by Yi Yin. Cough cough. Flawless White said in a deep voice, Yi Yin, stop stirring up trouble. There's no harm in having one more spot in the Sky Market this time. TSK, hearing this, Yi Yin immediately yawned and said indifferently, this is too boring. I've long heard that this year's freshmen have pretty good talent, especially someone called Lin Yi. Not only did he defeat the older students in the hunting war, he even charged to the top 10 of the Saint Transformation Board in a short 2 months. This kind of talent makes my hands itch. Hearing these words, the faces of many new students changed. How could they not tell that Yi Yin was targeting Lin Yi? The new students were worried, but the older students were excited. During this period of time, the Heavenly Sword sect had a faint tendency to suppress the older students, causing them to be especially furious. However, the Heavenly Sword sect had the advantage in numbers. In addition to Lin Yi and Qin Yu's strength, the others were unable to resist and could only silently endure. Now that Yi Yin had returned, the thought of suppressing the new students surfaced in their hearts. Otherwise, wouldn't it be too stifling? Back then, they had been suppressed by the older students for several years. How could this batch of new students suppress them? Especially the disciples from the previous batch, they felt even more aggrieved. Why were they always the ones who were injured? Interesting, with his brows slightly raised, Lin Yi raised his eyes and looked at Yi Yin. Coincidentally, Yi Yin was staring at Lin Yi, and the two immediately looked at each other. Crackle crackle. An invisible light flickered. Lin Yi and Yi Yin both narrowed their eyes, feeling a huge threat. Originally, Lin Yi didn't pay too much attention to Yi Yin. After all, he was only an outer court disciple. However, after looking at each other, Lin Yi realized that Yi Yin also cultivated both the martial way and spiritual will. Moreover, Yi Yin's spiritual will was even stronger than Lin Yi's. If it wasn't for Lin Yi's spiritual will being special and fused with the 3000 heavenly Tao, God's Guide, and many other cultivation techniques, allowing him to resist Yi Yin's spiritual will, Lin Yi would have been at a disadvantage in the previous exchange of glances. Enough! Sensing Lin Yi and Yi Yin's probing, Flawless White was enraged and slammed the table. Both of you stop! Who do you think you are? Have you grown wings and won't even listen to my words? His voice was like thunder, and a surging saint's aura suddenly enveloped the entire blood refinement ground. Under this mountain-like saint's aura, everyone in the blood refinement ground, including the elders, trembled slightly and their hearts trembled. Lin Yi and Yi Yin were no exception. They only felt a violent surge of energy rush down, and cold sweat dripped down their foreheads. At this moment, Yi Yin's expression finally changed, and he was extremely embarrassed. After all, Flawless White was one of the top powerhouses in the entire Cebu Gakuen. That kind of strength wasn't something that the current him could resist. With a cold snort, Flawless White withdrew his aura and looked at Yi Yin indifferently. Little guy, don't think that you can act presumptuously in front of me just because you've obtained some opportunities outside. This junior wouldn't dare. The corner of Yi Yin's mouth twitched, and he chose to admit defeat. The rest of the elders all let out a long sigh of relief, feeling very uncomfortable. This time, they had been suppressed by Flawless White's aura in front of so many students. How were they going to show their faces in the future? Lin Yi looked at Flawless White curiously. Didn't he say that there would be 10 spots? Wasn't he afraid that something would happen if there was suddenly an extra spot? Alright, the rest of the disciples are dismissed. Lin Yi, Yi Yin, the 11 of you stay. As soon as he finished speaking, Murong Ning and the other elders got up and began to disperse the students. In a short while, only Lin Yi, Yi Yin, the 11 people, and Flawless White were left in the blood refinement ground. The location of Sky Market is extremely special. In the future, you are not allowed to reveal any information about Sky Market. Flawless White's face was solemn as he said in a deep voice, "Anyone who violates this rule will be killed without mercy." Killed without mercy? Lin Yi and the others looked at each other, all of them extremely surprised. End of chapter. Chapter 688. Hiss, kill without mercy? Hearing this, Lin Yi, Qin Yue, and the others looked at each other, feeling extremely surprised. The rest of the people were even more dumbfounded. After coming to Cebu Gakuen for so many years, the elders had always been kind to them. They were shocked to see him being so serious all of a sudden. "Don't think that I'm joking," Flawless White said indifferently. "The existence of Sky Market is extremely special. If you speak of it, even if you are disciples of the Academy, no matter how powerful the forces behind you are, only death awaits you." Hiss, seeing how serious Flawless White was, Lin Yi and the rest could not help but gasp. They already knew that Flawless White would definitely do what he said. This made them curious. What kind of existence was Sky Market that could make Cebu Gakuen so nervous? "Alright, come with me." With a wave of his right hand, Flawless White flew up. An invisible wave quietly enveloped Lin Yi and the rest of the 11 people, and brought them to the mountain range. After a while, Lin Yi and the rest felt dizzy. When they woke up again, they were surrounded by white fog and could not see clearly. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Under Flawless White's lead, the group broke through the white fog and came to a strange cave entrance. Buzz! With a flash of light, 2 figures appeared and blocked the group's path. Lin Yi and the rest were shocked. When they looked over, they realized that the aura of the 2 figures was unfathomable. It was as deep as the sea and it was shocking. "Elders, it's time to open the sky ruins," Flawless White said indifferently. The 2 elders glanced at the group and whispered, "Why is there one more person?" "It's okay. I can take it." Flawless White's face was indifferent. The 2 elders frowned and said in a low voice, "It's too dangerous. If you can't take it, not only will you go berserk, but the entire Sky Market will collapse. Kicking one out is the best way. Elders, do you still not believe in my strength?" Flawless White raised his eyebrows. "Phew, alright, I'll trust you this time. If you can't hold on, just call for help. We'll be ready to help at any time." The 2 elders sighed and waved their index fingers. In an instant, the white fog dispersed, revealing a passage. "Thank you, Elder." Flawless White nodded slightly and immediately rushed into the cave residence with Lin Yi and the others. Lin Yi turned his head and glanced at Yi-In. He was extremely surprised in his heart. Just who was this Yi-In to actually be able to make Flawless White take such a risk for him? At that time, the time would have already passed. Flawless White could completely deprive Night Hidden of the opportunity to participate in the Sky Market. However, the result was the exact opposite. Not too long later, a glowing lotus platform appeared before the crowd. Lin Yi, who was deep in thought, suddenly came to his senses. He looked at the lotus platform in astonishment. He could feel that the golden light contained a special power. Hiss! What is this? Everyone kept sizing up the golden lotus. Sky Market is a world built by the 4 great regions. In a while, when you sit on the golden lotus, you will enter a world completely condensed by the power of spirit sense. In that world, you are not physical entities. You will enter it with your spirit sense. If you die, you will be forced out of Sky Market and your spirit sense will be damaged. I think Lin Yi knows the consequences of his spirit sense being damaged very well. He definitely won't want it to happen a second time. Phew, so I hope that you will try your best not to get hurt. Wait until Sky Market closes and safely exit. Flawless White said in a deep voice, "I won't say anything else because I don't know what exactly is in Sky Market." In an instant, Lin Yi, Yi-In, Qin Yu, and the others looked at Flawless White with strange expressions. What are you talking about if you don't know? Although that was what they thought, they were even more fearful. If even Elder Bai didn't know what was in Sky Market, Didn't that mean that Sky Market was full of danger? Although Sky Market is a world built by the 4 great regions, this is the first time it has opened. None of us know what is in that world. There are 2 missions for you to enter this time. First, explore Sky Market and record all the information in Sky Market. Second, find out the strength of the other 3 great regions, especially Abysmal Heavenly Region. Third, Hearing this, Lin Yi, Qin Yue, and the others looked at Bai Wuxia in confusion. They had agreed on 2 missions, so why was there a 3? Cough cough. Flawless White coughed softly. Third, protect yourselves. Alright, sit on the golden lotus. Next, you will go to a new world. At this point, Bai Wuxia's expression was extremely solemn. Although Cebu Gakuen had participated in Sky Market, the formation of a world had its own path. Even they couldn't interfere with it. Moreover, in the process of building Sky Market, they had reached a bottleneck. However, a genius from Abysmal Heavenly Region suddenly came up with a new method to solve all the problems and build a new world at an extremely fast speed. This made the people from Cebu Gakuen worried. Perhaps that world wasn't created by them but had existed before. However, they couldn't prove it with just guesses. Moreover, the other 2 great regions didn't have any objections. After a meeting, the people from Cebu Gakuen decided to suppress the matter and send students in to investigate before making a decision. Just as Flawless White was deep in thought, Lin Yi, Qin Yu, and the others sat on the golden lotus. In an instant, Lin Yi and the others were covered by the golden light. They felt warm and comfortable. Phew! I hope that our guess is wrong. With a thought, Flawless White put his palms together and waved them around. In the next instant, the golden lotus gave off a bright light and covered Lin Yi and the others. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The golden light drew many pictures in the void and rippled with a mysterious power. Lin Yi and the others sat cross-legged on the golden lotuses. The power of their divine senses quietly emerged from their spirit seas and condensed into figures one after another. However, no one noticed that there were 2 figures beside Lin Ye's spiritual sense figure. A strange cat and a lady silently circled around Lin Ye's spiritual sense figure. Outside the golden lotus, Flawless White trembled and spat out a mouthful of blood. How could this be? SSS. With my strength, I can safely teleport 15 or 20 people, let alone 11. No, the auspicious sign is also in Lin Ye's body. At this point, Flawless White couldn't help but smile bitterly. I forgot about this. Phew, with the auspicious sign, I don't have to worry about their safety. I hope that everyone can return safely. End of chapter. Chapter 689. Whoosh, whoosh. A sinister wind blew on his body, sending chills down his spine. Feeling the sinister wind, Lin Yi gradually woke up. He shook his head violently and opened his eyes slowly. What entered his sight was a ruin. A dilapidated palace with broken walls and dilapidated walls stood quietly on a piece of land. Hiss! What is this place? And this sinister wind, it feels real when it blows on my body. After rubbing his arms for a moment, Lin Yi was rather surprised. He looked around but shockingly discovered that there was no one beside him. What's going on? Lin Yi was shocked. He hurriedly immersed his mind, wanting to enter the ninefold space. However, in the ninefold space, the Chaos Divine Tree and other supreme treasures were still there, but Biluo was nowhere to be seen. Could it be? Is this an illusion? Raising his brows, Lin Yi couldn't help but be surprised. After hesitating for a moment, Lin Yi began to examine his body carefully. He pinched it. The pain was very real, which surprised Lin Yi. Wasn't this a world completely built by divine perception? Why did his body feel so real? Even the feeling of the sinister wind blowing was so real. Hiss! Seems like there's indeed something wrong with this world. If it's a world completely built by divine perception, it's normal that Biluo can't follow me. I can't be sure if it's an illusion. After pondering for a moment, Lin Yi strode toward the ruins. In the ruins, broken fences and dilapidated walls were extremely dilapidated. There were also countless things scattered on the ground. Lin Yi examined carefully and immediately realized that something was wrong. Most of those things were bones with strange runes carved on them, giving off an indescribable aura. Could it be that these are all items used for rituals? Raising his eyebrows, Lin Yi thought of the sacrificial ceremony. However, why were there strange runes carved on the bones? Moreover, most of the tools used for rituals were made of bones. It was shocking. Only in ancient times did humans use bones. As early as hundreds of thousands of years ago, humans had already learned how to smelt iron. Could it be that the world constructed by divine will is still in the ancient times? Squinting his eyes, Lin Yi did not hesitate to pick up some bones and put them away. Apart from some sacrificial offerings made from bones, there was nothing else in the ruins. Lin Yi jumped onto the ruins and looked around. All around them was a vast and boundless wilderness. Only in the distance to the east, there was a flickering light. Without any hesitation, Lin Yi rushed towards the east. No matter what, they had to find the person first. It would be even better if they could meet the other members of Cebu Gakuen. At this moment, Lin Yi was a little depressed. He had forgotten to ask Elder by how many people could enter the Sky Market World. It had to be said that the Sky Market World was not small. The flickering light made Lin Yi run for an hour, but he still had not arrived. He was only getting closer. 4 hours later, the sky darkened. It was as if a curtain had been pulled over the entire sky. In the blink of an eye, it was pitch black. This surprised Lin Yi. As he furrowed his brows, a cold aura surged from his body. It was as if the temperature of the entire space had dropped. The only good thing was that the flickering light in the distance was getting brighter. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Lin Yi immediately increased his speed. However, after a while, there was a sudden shrill sound. 10 sharp gusts of wind shot towards Lin Yi like sharp arrows. "Who is it?" Lin Yi exclaimed. With a thought, his divine will turned into a fire net and blocked all the gusts of wind. At the same time, a dazzling light bloomed and illuminated the area around Lin Yi. Lin Yi looked around and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He could see that countless birds with pitch-black metal spikes had surrounded him. Screech! Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The birds let out shrill cries. In an instant, the metal spikes on their bodies shot out and covered the sky as they stabbed towards Lin Yi. "You are courting death." Lin Yi was not afraid at all. He shouted and waved his hands. The fire net exploded and turned into a sea of fire, enveloping all the metal spikes. Beep, beep, beep. The raging flames burned. Under the scorching heat, not to mention the metal spikes, even the birds let out shrill cries as they were melted by the flames. Hiss! At night, this world seems to be filled with danger. Rolling his eyes, Lin Yi pondered for a moment, but did not take it to heart and kept rushing towards the fire ahead. Those demonic beasts had not even reached the Saint Realm. Why would Lin Yi care about them? The fire flickered over Lin Yi's body, illuminating the space around him to prevent any demons from attacking again. And yet, as if the fire was too dazzling, more demons would appear almost immediately after a wave of demons charged out. Their ability was also becoming increasingly formidable, and in the end, they already possessed the power of a demi-saint. After hunting and killing almost 10 waves of demons, a huge building finally appeared in front of Lin Yi. The building was also casually constructed with rocks and bones. It appeared to be quite old and shabby. However, the mysterious patterns on the bones flickered with radiance in the night sky. They enveloped the entire huge building, as well as the area several hundred feet behind it, protecting it within. Roar! The demons that had been chasing Lin Yi all retreated with a low growl after sensing the radiance. Clearly, they could not approach the radiance. Sensing that, Lin Yi was puzzled. Were those demons afraid of the building, or the bones that flickered with radiance? Rolling his eyes, Lin Yi took out the bones in his bosom, and suddenly realized that the runes on the bones were also flickering with radiance. It was just that they were too dilapidated, and the radiance was very weak, as if it could be blown away with a single breath. Hiss. It seems that these bones still have great use. Narrowing his eyes, Lin Yi put away the bones and carefully walked towards the radiance. Hum! Without any obstruction, Lin Ye's body passed through the radiance and entered the building. All at once, a strange singing voice rang beside Lin Ye's ears. Looking up, he saw a group of people dressed in animal hides nearby, their faces painted with strange patterns. They were dancing in front of a bonfire, emitting strange sounds. Is this an offering? Lin Yi was startled at the sight. After taking a closer look, he realized that there were countless stone houses within the building, and that everything else was no different from an ordinary village. At the very center, a bonfire burned fiercely, with dozens of people dancing about. Beside them, there were almost 100 people kneeling around, their faces respectful as if they were praying for something. Hiss, what is this place? Even an offering is being made. End of chapter. Chapter 690. Looking at this scene, Lin Yi frowned. He stopped in his tracks and did not rush forward. The group of people did not notice Lin Ye's arrival and continued to worship in an orderly manner. Roar! After a while, a tiger's roar sounded. Light scattered and formed a white tiger. It roared endlessly and looked extremely ferocious. This is great. The guardian spirit has appeared. When the white tiger appeared, the group of people were ecstatic and kept kowtowing. Then, the white tiger disappeared and countless rays of light fell on everyone's body. Buzz! In an instant, everyone's physique improved significantly. Even their mental states were restored to their peak. Hiss! What method is this? It can increase one's strength? With his mouth slightly open, Lin Yi was stunned as he looked at the group of people whose strength kept increasing. It was the first time he had seen that one could gain strength through worship. Although the strength of that group of people was extremely weak, Lin Yi was extremely curious about their cultivation system. Could it be that this new space had given birth to a brand new cultivation system? If the existing cultivation system was combined with the cultivation system of this world, he wondered what would happen. As he muttered to himself, Lin Ye's body flashed and he appeared directly above the group of people. Who is it? Hearing the voice, the group of people suddenly raised their heads. When they saw Lin Yi, they were instantly stunned and stood there in a daze. Lin Ye's attire was very different from theirs. In addition, Lin Ye's divine sense was surging. They were immediately stunned. This is the descent of a god? Everyone hesitated and looked at Lin Yi in shock. Even the people who were worshipping forgot to jump and just stared blankly at Lin Yi. Hearing everyone's words, Lin Yi rolled his eyes and came up with a good idea. With a thought, the power of his divine sense turned into a thunderbolt and wrapped around Lin Yi. Rumble! Lightning bloomed, and flames ignited around Lin Ye's body, illuminating his majestic body. Seeing this, the group of people were no longer surprised. They kowtowed to Lin Yi and shouted, "The descent of a god!" Lin Ye's strength was simply beyond their imagination. Therefore, they had already regarded Lin Yi as a god. Feeling the group's worship, Lin Yi was curious. He wondered if the rest of the people who entered Sky Market would be worshipped and treated as gods. Of course, Lin Yi only thought about it in his heart. He would never say this out loud. The god did not give up on us. Even though we are trapped in the Forgotten Land, the god can still appear. God, you must have saved us from the Forgotten Land. The group of people wearing animal skins kept kowtowing. Hearing this, Lin's words, the Forgotten Land? Sky Market was the Forgotten Land? Or could it be that this was the Forgotten Land in Sky Market? Lin Yi rolled his eyes and shouted, I am the Saint of Thunder and Fire. Who are you? His voice was like thunder, reverberating in the ears of the group of people and shaking their minds. Saint of thunder and fire? Which god is this? I don't think I've heard of him. Could it be that a new god entered the forgotten land by mistake? In an instant, the group of people could not help but discuss in low voices. Lin Yi had been paying attention to the changes in the group's expressions. After noticing that they were a little surprised, he spoke again in a thunderous voice. Who are you? Why are you in the forgotten land? As soon as he finished speaking, the group of people kowtowed again and begged, God of thunder and fire, we were originally the protectors of the heavenly feather continent. 10,000 years ago, we were framed by someone and were punished by the gods to come to the forgotten land. Honorable God of thunder and fire, can you bring us out of the forgotten land? We were set up. If we are trapped in the forgotten land, our entire race will face a disaster. Yes, honorable God of thunder and fire, please save us. In an instant, hundreds of people kowtowed. A special force rushed out of their bodies and turned into an invisible force that floated in front of Lin Yi. This is... Looking at the invisible force in front of him, Lin Yi squinted his eyes and stared at it. He could feel that the invisible force had greatly improved him. However, it was especially strange. It seemed to contain the beliefs of everyone below. If Lin Yi was unable to save those people and meet their expectations after absorbing this power, then perhaps this power would instead be harmful to him. Hiss! What is this thing? It's so strange. Looking around, Lin Yi only hesitated for a moment. Then, he gritted his teeth and absorbed the invisible force into his body. Buzz! In an instant, Lin Yi's spiritual power mutated again and became more sensitive. At the same time, Lin Yi's mind was filled with the wishes and thoughts of the people below. This caused him to be rather surprised. He didn't expect that a group of people with such weak strength would actually have such a powerful will. I'm aware of your wishes, said Qin Wentian. Lin Yi rolled his eyes and said in a deep voice, Tell me everything you know about the Forgotten Land, otherwise I won't be able to take you out. I can only go out alone. Hearing this, the people below all became suspicious. Normally, a god was completely capable of bringing an entire tribe out with him. However, they thought about it and realized that they had never heard of Lin Yi's name. They thought that he was a new god and no longer doubted him. They immediately welcomed Lin Yi down and treated him with great respect. Then, they told him everything they knew about the Forgotten Land. The Forgotten Land, just as Lin Yi had guessed, was an area that had been banished. In it there were countless tribes. They were either criminals or framed, so they could only live in the Forgotten Land forever. Not only was there a lack of spiritual qi, but there were also countless demonic beasts. Especially at night, as long as it was not a village and was protected by divine power, the rest of the place was occupied by demonic beasts. According to the people in the village, the strongest demonic beasts were close to the god level. However, they could never break through to the god level. In the Forgotten Land there was no rule power. No matter how talented or powerful one could not break through to the god level. This place was like a cage. After hearing this, Lin Yi had a rough understanding of the Forgotten Land. There were 3 ways to get out of the Forgotten Land. First, the god would give a decree to cancel the punishment of a tribe. Second, find the guardian of the Forgotten Land and kill him. The third was to pass through a legendary passage. After thinking for a while, Lin Yi chose the third way. End of chapter. Chapter 691. The first method required him to contact the so-called heavenly god in the upper world. Lin Yi couldn't do that. Killing the guardians was too troublesome. Moreover, there were many sealed people in the Forgotten Land. If the guardians died, the entire Forgotten Land would be in trouble. Lin Yi had just arrived in the heavenly ruins, and it would be troublesome if he caused trouble. Thus, he could only try the third method. With Lin Yi's strength, wouldn't it be easy for him to pass through a passage that restricted people below the Saint Realm? After making up his mind, Lin Yi calmed everyone down and sent them out to search for information about the others. Even though Yi Yin and the others weren't familiar with him, they were still disciples of the Cebu Gakuin. Lin Yi wouldn't ignore them. The next day, as the sun rose, the light that enveloped the village dissipated. The runes on the bones no longer emitted light. Everyone in the village started to search for information. Lin Yi didn't stay idle. He searched for information about the others and the entire Forgotten Land. After all, those people were sealed. Even though they had lived in the Forgotten Land for several hundred years, there were still many things that they couldn't find. It had to be said that the Forgotten Land was huge. Even with Lin Ye's speed, he couldn't finish searching in one day. There was a village every 300 feet. Some of the stronger villages occupied more land, and they weren't inferior to a city. At the same time, their strength was much stronger than ordinary villagers. Of course, even though they were strong, they still hadn't broken through to the Saint Realm. The strongest person Lin Yi sensed was only a fifth tribulation half-true saint. They couldn't even take one move from him. Obviously, the gods they spoke of in this world were existences above the Saint Realm. However, Lin Yi still didn't have any clue about the Forgotten Land's mysteries. After 3 days, Lin Yi finally searched the entire Forgotten Land. However, he didn't find anything strange. He also didn't meet Yi Yin and the others. In fact, he hadn't met any of the geniuses from the 4 major regions who had entered the Sky Market. Those who were qualified to enter the Sky Market world were at least at the peak of the Great Sage Realm. If they came to the Forgotten Land, Lin Yi would definitely be able to sense it. This made Lin Yi extremely flabbergasted. Could it be that he was the only one who was lucky enough to come to this Forgotten Land? On the 4th day, Lin Yi gave up on searching for the rest of the people. He ordered the villagers to pack up their things, while he himself flew towards the largest city in the Forgotten Land. It was a city with countless bones hanging on it, carved with all kinds of strange runes. In the past few days, Lin Yi had also used illusions to ask the people in the village about the bones. However, they did not understand the principles behind the bones. They only knew that the runes carved on the bones had a special power. Moreover, what they cultivated were the runes. By carving the runes on their bodies, they would subtly improve their physique, allowing them to possess all kinds of abilities. This kind of cultivation method made Lin Yi extremely surprised. However, the strength of the people in the village was too low and they couldn't touch the core. He could only choose to go to a stronger city. After sneaking into the city, Lin Yi sensed for a while and directly found the strongest person. He quietly surrounded him. In the secret room, Su Fuwu, who was cultivating, suddenly felt uneasy. He frowned slightly and exited his cultivation state. The moment he opened his eyes, Su Fuwu was shocked. He clenched his right hand into a fist and suddenly punched forward. Buzz! As he punched out, runes immediately flickered on Su Fuwu's arm. In an instant, 1,000 kilograms of power exploded, mixed with a wild wind, whistling incomparably. Bang! Crack! Amidst the crisp sound, Su Fuwu's expression changed drastically. He let out a miserable shriek. He only felt a huge force sweep out. In the next moment, his arm was broken. A figure stood quietly in front of Su Fuwu. The thing that blocked the punch was a pair of palms. This power is actually not much weaker than a 9th tribulation half-true saint. Feeling the power of that punch, Lin Yi was quite surprised. Although the power of that punch was not as strong as the saint energy, just by looking at the instantaneous explosion, it was much stronger than the saint energy. Of course, there were also flaws. If a 9th tribulation half-true saint had struck that punch, under the circumstances where Lin Yi did not retaliate, he would at most be sent flying. It was impossible for his arm to be broken. In other words, this kind of cultivation method's defensive power and physique were not as strong as holy force. After realizing this point, Lin Ye's interest in this kind of cultivation method decreased significantly. Who are you? Su Fuwu's body trembled as he looked at Lin Yi with fear in his eyes. He was afraid that Lin Yi would kill him the moment he made a move. In this forgotten land, Su Fuwu could be said to be the strongest person. Outside the secret training room, there were many experts protecting him. However, this guy in front of him was able to sneak in without making a sound. He was even able to ignore his attack, and the rebound force caused his arm to break. This kind of strength caused him to be extremely terrified. Who am I? Lin Yi rubbed his nose and suddenly sat down cross-legged. He said in a low voice, "As long as you cooperate with me, I won't hurt you. As for my identity, at least for now, you don't have the qualifications to know. Then, what do you want me to do?" Su Fuwu gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "As long as you say it, I will do my best to satisfy you. And it's very simple. I want to know what the runes on your body are." Lin Yi took out a skeleton and pointed at the runes on it. He said, "Also, how are these bones carved with runes made? I have tried to complete the runes on the bones, but it was useless." Hearing this, the corners of Su Fuwu's mouth twitched incomparably. The original horror turned into shock, and his face was filled with disbelief. You? Who are you?" Su Fuwu cried out in alarm as he pointed at Lin Yi, his entire body trembling. A terrifying thought quietly appeared in his mind. "Didn't you hear what I said just now?" Lin Ye's face turned cold. He waved his right hand and the power of his divine sense turned into purple thunderbolts, which quietly wrapped around Su Fuwu. Crackle, crackle! As the thunderbolts bloomed, Su Fuwu felt his entire body go numb and uncontrollable. "If you say any more nonsense, I will kill you directly." As soon as he finished speaking, a biting cold murderous intent pierced Su Fuwu's neck. Su Fuwu's hair stood on end and cold sweat flowed down his body. He swallowed his saliva and said, "We cultivate divine runes. However, this is the Forgotten Land and we are unable to comprehend divine runes. Therefore, we can only cultivate bone runes." Divine runes? Bone runes? End of chapter. Chapter 692. Sacred runes? Bone runes? Frowning, Lin Yi touched his nose and asked, "How are the bone runes formed? Are the runes on your body cultivated or transplanted?" There are two types of bone runes. Under the threat of death, Su Fuwu did not resist. He revealed all the information he knew. The first type of bone runes comes from the bodies of beasts and ancient foreign tribes. In the process of their cultivation, the bones in their bodies are influenced by the power and will condense bone runes. The second type of bone runes comes from the human body. After studying the bone runes of beasts and ancient foreign tribes, we condense the power in them into the body and form the acquired bone runes. When one's strength reaches a certain level, the runes will be engraved on the bones and contain a strong power. Su Fuwu continued, "Every bone rune corresponds to a special power. Even if the owner dies, the bones can preserve that power." This power is very strange. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. He was curious about the bone runes. If the bone runes could coexist with Saint Force and Divine Sense, it might be a great help to Lin Yi. "Show me the power of different bone runes." Rolling his eyes, Lin Yi waved his right hand and the power of his divine sense spread out like a spring breeze, brushing against Su Fuwu. In an instant, Su Fuwu was shocked and looked at Lin Yi. In just a breath's time, he felt a warmth in his right hand and in the next moment, his broken arm recovered. It was shocking. What kind of strength is this? Could he be a god? No, if he is a god, how could he not know about divine runes? Could it be that he really came from another world? Su Fuwu suddenly thought of a possibility recorded in the ancient books, and cold sweat dripped down his forehead. Noticing this, Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and said, "I will say it again. Show me the power of the bone runes. Also, if you don't listen to what I say next time, there's no meaning in your life anymore. Yes. Su Fuwu was instantly jolted awake when he felt the piercingly cold, killing intent. He didn't dare hesitate any longer and waved his hands. In the next moment, 2 talisman markings appeared on his hand. Ah! Raging fire! With a soft shout, Su Fuwu pushed his hands forward. The bone pattern contained within them suddenly released 2 flames that surged into the distance. With a flash, Lin Yi directly flashed into the flames and felt the damage. It had to be said that the power of the bone marks was indeed powerful. If Su Fuwu's strength was converted to holy force, he would only be a 5th tribulation half-true saint. However, the power of the bone marks was comparable to a 9th tribulation half-true saint. Mad Fist. Su Fuwu withdrew the flame, shook his shoulder, clenched his right hand into a fist, and punched out. Runes appeared, and the power within them was as heavy as a mountain. Boom, boom, boom. Immediately after, Su Fuwu experimented with the power of many different bone patterns, such as thunder, gale, and moonlight saber. The power was extremely shocking. The more he sensed, the more Lin Yi was interested in the bone patterns. In the end, Su Fuwu even released a power comparable to a true saint, causing the entire secret room to tremble. Although this power was weak to Lin Yi, Su Fuwu was able to release the power of a true saint with his 5th tribulation, half-true saint cultivation. This was enough to prove the power of the bone marks. Even Lin Yi couldn't achieve this without using his divine sense or supreme saint artifact. It would be great if these bone marks could merge with divine sense and holy force. Rubbing his nose, Lin Yi said solemnly, "How do you cultivate these bone marks? How do you cultivate?" After hesitating for a moment, Su Fuwu said in a frightened voice, "We observe the bone marks and comprehend the power within them. After successfully comprehending them, the bone marks will enter our body and allow us to control them. The deeper we comprehend it, the stronger our control over that power will be. How many bone marks do you have? Show them to me." Lin Yi said solemnly, "If you succeed, seeing how cooperative you are, I can give you a good fortune." This, Su Fuwu rolled his eyes and stood up immediately. He walked to the secret room and took out some skeletons. On those skeletons there were strange runes engraved on them. Rays of light circulated around them. Su Fuwu already understood that Lin Yi was definitely not someone from his world. However, Lin Yi's strength was as strong as the legendary heavenly god. In addition, Lin Yi was interested in the bone marks. Su Fuwu suddenly thought of a possibility. Perhaps he could hug Lin Yi's thigh and leave this place. Therefore, Su Fuwu did not hesitate, nor did he hide anything. He directly took out his collection of bone marks and offered them to Lin Yi. "Lord, these are all bone marks. You can cultivate them as you wish." Su Fuwu revealed a flattering smile. "Oh!" Raising his eyebrows, Lin Yi looked at Su Fuwu in surprise. He did not expect him to make such a choice. "Fine, since you're so loyal, I'll give you a reward." With a thought, a drop of origin source heavenly water appeared and entered Su Fuwu's body. Boom! In an instant, surging saint power cleansed Su Fuwu's body like a holy radiance. They mainly cultivated bone marks, but their physiques were not strong. After accumulating for a long time, there were many internal injuries in their bodies. Under the effect of the origin source heavenly water, Su Fuwu's internal injuries dissipated at an extremely fast speed. His qi and blood power recovered to their peak state in an instant. Feeling the changes in his body, Su Fuwu was stunned. He was even more certain that his decision was right. However, the benefits of the origin source heavenly water were not limited to this. After strengthening Su Fuwu's physique, the many bone marks engraved on Su Fuwu's body were also strengthened. They began to operate and emitted a bright light. Sensing this, Su Fuwu's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly sat down cross-legged and began to cultivate. This fellow is quite clever. Perhaps I can bring him out as well. Sky Market, what kind of place is this? It's clearly a world built by the people of the 4 major regions, but it actually has its own cultivation system and history. Looks like this matter is of great importance. Narrowing his eyes, Lin Yi did not think about anything else. He took out a bone mark engraved with runes and carefully observed it, feeling the energy ripples within it. Buzz, buzz. A gentle light slowly emerged from the bone marks and lingered around Lin Yi. End of chapter. Chapter 693. Hum, hum, hum. The bone runes that were shining with 7 colors intertwined into a light shadow, lingering around Lin Yi. Lin Yi's talent was not weak. In addition, his divine sense had reached level 59. Comprehending the bone runes relied on the divine sense, not to mention that the power level of the bone runes was weaker than the divine sense. In just half a day, Lin Yi had comprehended the so-called bone runes into his own ability. Moreover, he had thoroughly analyzed the bone runes. In layman's terms, the bone runes condensed power on the bones and survived in the form of a formation. After a person died, their bones would be separated from their body, and the formation on the bones would seal that power. If someone could unlock the formation, they would naturally be able to come into contact with the power, and gain a subtle improvement and comprehension. After a long time, they would naturally be able to comprehend the power and borrow it. The stronger the talent, the faster the speed of comprehension, and the stronger the power they could control. Hiss! If that's the case, I can completely condense my own power into the bone runes. No, the saint power and divine sense are too strong, and the bone runes can't withstand it. When I get out of this so-called forgotten land, I must find a chance to study the divine runes. Lin Yi made up his mind and immediately ended his cultivation. In an instant, the endless bone runes, like flowing light, entered Lin Yi's body. Hum! The surging power, like a volcanic eruption, suddenly rushed out from the bone runes. Bang! 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 Without any hindrance, the energy blasted the entire secret chamber apart. Fortunately, Lin Yi reacted quickly. With a wave of his hand, he used the divine sense to protect Su Fuwu, who was cultivating at the side. Su Fuwu would have been directly blown to death. Swoosh! Swoosh! The secret chamber collapsed. In an instant, the entire city was alarmed, and countless people began to rush over. Cough! Cough! The sound of coughing rang out. Su Fuwu finished his cultivation and woke up. Before the ecstasy on his face appeared, he realized that something was wrong with the secret chamber, and the corner of his mouth could not help but twitch. He had spent more than 10 years building this secret chamber. It was supposed to protect him, but now it was destroyed. However, when he thought about how his cultivation level had increased, how he had activated the power of the bone patterns, and even reached the realm of Saint, which was also the god they spoke of, all the depression in Su Fuwu's heart turned into ecstasy. After his ecstasy, Su Fuwu's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly knelt down on one knee in front of Lin Yi and respectfully kowtowed. "Thank you, sir, for the good fortune you gave me, allowing me to make another breakthrough. If you perform well, I can help you break through your shackles." Lin Yi looked indifferent. "I don't dare." Su Fuwu rolled his eyes and suddenly said, "I only hope that I can follow by your side in the future." Hearing this, the corners of Lin Yi's mouth curled up, revealing a smile. He sized Su Fuwu up and couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Good boy, your wishful thinking is pretty good. I'll leave the rest to you. Don't let anyone else discover me. If you perform well, I can let you follow by my side." As his voice fell, Lin Yi's body had already disappeared in front of Su Fuwu. Seeing Lin Yi suddenly disappear, Su Fuwu swallowed a mouthful of saliva, immediately feeling extremely excited. The stronger Lin Yi's strength, the happier he was. At least, the hope of being able to leave the forgotten land increased by a fraction. Su Fuwu had been trapped in the Forgotten Land for hundreds of years. As long as he could get out, he would pay any price. Before long, the rest of the people rushed over. Seeing that Su Fuwu was fine, they heaved a sigh of relief. After Su Fuwu settled everyone down, he hurriedly dispersed them and waited for Lin Yi to descend again. At the same time, Su Fuwu even went to the secret chamber and took out all of his collection. Su Fuwu was the strongest person in the entire Forgotten Land after all. His private collection was especially rich, and there were actually many bone patterns. Bring all of these bone patterns for me to study. Lin Yi suddenly appeared behind Su Fuwu. Looking at those bone patterns, his eyes narrowed slightly. Su Fuwu had long guessed Lin Yi's strength and was not too surprised. He very decisively handed over all the bone patterns to Lin Yi. "Oh right, do you know the difference between divine marks and bone patterns?" Lin Yi suddenly asked. Although the bone patterns were strong, they were ultimately not as strong as Saint Power and Divine Sense. If one could not fuse them, studying the bone patterns would be a waste of time. "This I don't know." Su Fuwu smiled bitterly and said, "I lived in the Forgotten Land since I was young and have never come into contact with divine marks. Even in the ancient books, the records about divine marks are very little. It seems that no one has ever seen it before." "Oh right." All of a sudden, Su Fuwu's eyes lit up as he shouted, "I remember now. According to the legends, there is a passageway in the Forgotten Land that leads to the outside world. Inside that passageway there are divine runes, the only divine mark in the Forgotten Land." Rolling his eyes, Lin Yi said in a deep voice, "Then do you know where that passage is?" "I don't know." Su Fuwu shook his head and said, "That passage is extremely special. It appears sometimes, and sometimes it is invisible. It is said that it will only appear once every 100 years. Sir, are you planning to leave this place?" Speaking of this, Su Fuwu looked at Lin Yi with eyes full of hope. Clearly, Su Fuwu also wanted to leave this place. Only appears once every 100 years. Frowning slightly, Lin Yi could not help but feel conflicted. His time was very tight. It was simply impossible to spend so much time waiting here. However, that passage had divine marks, and the method was the fastest. It was worth waiting for a period of time. These few days, go outside and walk around more. See if you can find that passage. After a long time, Lin Yi gritted his teeth and said, "If you can't find that passage within 5 days, bring me to the place where the guardian is. With your strength and status, you should be able to find the guardian, right?" "Of course I can." Seeing that Lin Yi really had the intention of going out, Su Fuwu could be said to be wildly ecstatic. Without any hesitation, he agreed. "Then you go and look. 3 days later, I'll wait for you here." Nodding his head slightly, Lin Yi put away all of the bone patterns into the 9-level space. Flicking his sleeves, his figure flew up, rushing towards the initial village. He already received that mass of power. If he did not bring those people out, that mass of power would be harmful to him instead. Returning to the village, everyone could not find Lin Yi and were all incomparably anxious. Only all the way until Lin Yi appeared did they calm down. Lin Yi made everyone continue to search for the passage, as well as traces of the rest of the people. However, this time, everyone in the village became anxious, their hearts restless and uneasy. End of this chapter. Chapter 694. 3 days passed quickly. The people in the village still could not find the passage. As for the others, there was no news. Lin Yi could roughly confirm that the others had not been sent to the Forgotten Land. Immediately, he led the entire village to the city where Su Fuwu was. The people in the village only believed in Lin Yi's strength when they saw that he could fly on the clouds. Arriving above the city, Lin Shui used his divine sense to locate Su Fuwu, who was making arrangements for his funeral. It had to be said that Su Fuwu was very perceptive. 3 days ago, Su Fuwu saw that Lin Yi was unwilling to take his people away. Therefore, He only said that he would follow Lin Yi. Now, he had arranged everything in advance. It could be considered as an explanation to his people. After Su Fuwu finished his instructions, Lin Yi used his divine thought to let Su Fuwu fly up. In the air, Su Fuwu was surprised to see hundreds of ant-like existences standing behind Lin Yi. Su Fuwu rolled his eyes and didn't say anything. He only bowed respectfully to Lin Yi. "Sir, I am stupid and did not find the passage." "It's okay." Lin Yi nodded slightly. Since they could not find the passage, they could only rely on the guardian. This seems to be Su Tianren, the existence closest to God in the Forgotten Land. It's really him. I didn't expect that even Su Tianren would be a follower of the god of thunder and fire. In the village, some people recognized Su Fuwu and were shocked. "Okay, it's time to leave the Forgotten Land." With a slight cough, Lin Yi said to Su Fuwu, "You lead the way and take us to the guardian." "Okay." Su Fuwu was delighted and immediately led the way. Lin Yi and the others rushed into the distance as if they were flying on the clouds. Su Fuwu became more confident after realizing this. He had challenged the guardian before. Although he was defeated in a few moves, he could roughly tell that the guardian's strength was only at the early stage of the god realm. However, the impression that Lin Yi gave him was that he was unfathomable. According to their world strength, they were absolutely true god realm or celestial deity realm powerhouses. The Forgotten Land, after all, had countless secrets. Under Su Fuwu's lead, they actually came to an area that had never been explored before. Countless bone runes scattered in the surroundings, and a lot of power appeared. A moment later, a huge hall appeared in front of everyone. Different from the buildings in the Forgotten Land, this palace was quite luxurious and dazzling. Every building was engraved with complete bone runes, which contained powerful energy that protected the palace. These bone patterns, Lin Yi sized up those bone markings and was rather surprised. The power of the bone markings could actually connect together. Previously, the bone markings that Lin Yi had come into contact with were all one kind of bone markings that contained a kind of power. The power of the bone markings was also used separately. Even Su Fuwu was the same. But now, the power of the bone markings on this palace fused together. "Your Excellency, these are pseudo-divine runes." Su Fuwu had already guessed Lin Ye's identity and knew that he didn't know much about the bone inscriptions. He immediately explained, "The biggest difference between bone inscriptions and divine inscriptions is the degree of fusion. Each kind of divine rune is virtually comprehended by oneself. It's a unique power. At the same time, the power of the divine runes can completely fuse with the bone markings. After the bone markings in the body are all assimilated, the power will fuse into one. Like this, when the power fuses together, but the divine rune has not completely devoured the rest of the bone markings, it's a pseudo-divine rune." Hearing that, Lin Yi came to a realization. No wonder he kept feeling that the cultivation method of bone markings had a flaw. He did not expect that that was just the prerequisite cultivation method. It was also no wonder that no one could leave the Forgotten Land for so many years. This piece of heaven and earth had a repulsive nature towards divine runes, only allowing the existence of bone markings. No matter how strong one's talent was, if one could not condense a divine rune, how could one break through to the divine realm? I hope that after leaving the Forgotten Land, the so-called divine runes can give me a surprise. Come, follow me in. Nodding slightly, Lin Yi raised his right hand. On his arm, a bright bone marking suddenly appeared, turned into a blade, and flew out fiercely. Poochie! A crisp sound rang out, and the light screen was torn apart without any obstruction. Lin Yi immediately rushed in with the crowd. In an instant, the palace was clearly reflected in everyone's eyes. Lin Yi put down the crowd, walked up the stone steps step by step, and walked towards the entrance of the palace. Buzz! On the stone steps, almost every time Lin Yi took a step, a bone markings would appear and enter Lin Ye's body, engraving on Lin Ye's body. Buzz buzz buzz. Not long after, the sky was filled with shining bone markings, and Lin Yi was completely wrapped up. Looking from afar, he was like a god descending to the mortal world. Hiss, a miracle! God! This is really a god! Su Fuwu was shocked. He could feel that Lin Yi was absorbing the power of the entire palace. Hiss, this power is the key to supporting the existence of the guardian. If he completely absorbs it, will the guardian still appear? Narrowing his eyes, Su Fuwu quickly reacted and continued to follow Lin Yi forward. As for the people in the village, they knelt down again and continuously kowtowed. Rumble! Suddenly, the palace trembled as if there was an earthquake shaking everyone's body. Who is it? Who dares to destroy the divine runes here? A thunderous voice roared in everyone's ears. In the next moment, the ground shook violently. With a loud bang, several figures broke open the palace and flew out from it. Each figure was more than 100 feet tall, like giants. At this very moment, several hundred bone markings, densely packed, appeared on several giants' bodies, erupting with powerful strength. Your Excellency, these are the puppets guarding the palace. Their strength is merely Deva realm. Leave it to me to deal with. Su Fuwu stepped forward decisively and cupped his fists to request. Raising his brows, Lin Yi swept a glance over the several puppet giants and detected that their strength was merely half-sage. He nodded his head and agreed to Su Fuwu's request. Just nice, he also wanted to see how they, who possessed bone markings, fought. But Lin Yi was still a little curious. If not for Su Fuwu's words, he really could not tell that those people were actually puppets. Their bodies clearly had strong life undulations, making Lin Yi rather surprised. While Lin Yi was surprised, Su Fuwu already leaped high. On both hands, an icy blue and crimson light appeared respectively. Cold moon blade, blazing ambition. Bone markings bloomed. The icy blue blade and crimson flame howled out, whistling towards those 6 puppet giants. This chapter ends. Chapter 695. Buzz! Bright bone patterns also bloomed on the bodies of the 6 giants. Earthen yellow stone walls appeared out of thin air, blocking in front of them. This is the moment I've been waiting for! Seeing this scene, Su Fuwu shouted softly. Lightning immediately appeared in his eyes. His eyes contained the lightning bone tattoo. Crackle, crackle. Almost instantly, thunder rumbled in the air. 6 sky-blue thunderbolts struck down from thin air, immediately striking the 6 giants. Rumble! After being struck by the thunderbolts, the 6 giants' bodies shook violently. Lightning burst forth, constantly paralyzing them. At the same time, bone patterns appeared on their bodies, expelling the power of the thunderbolt. Bang, bang, bang! However, after losing their support, the earthen yellow stone walls were quickly shattered by the machete and the flames. Su Fuwu roared and waved his hands. Another bone pattern appeared, containing a strong saber intent. Buzz! The saber light broke through the air like a gust of wind flashing by. The sharp aura suddenly split the space into 2 halves. Sensing this, Lin Yi could not help but shake his head slightly. Although the destructive power of the bone patterns was great, the other aspects were too weak. When fighting, only a few bone patterns could be used at a time. They had to be dispersed before other powers could be used. Crack! Amidst the crisp sound, the 6 giants' bodies shook. Su Fuwu was the #1 expert in the Forgotten Land. How could he miss such an opportunity? Bone patterns appeared on his feet and he stomped on the ground. His entire body was like a cannonball that was shot out of the barrel, crashing towards the 6 giants. At the same time, lightning appeared on Su Fuwu's arms. Crackle, crackle! He punched out with both fists, and the lightning was even more intense, enveloping the 6 giants. In the next moment, Su Fuwu continuously exploded with powerful strength. All kinds of bone pattern power continuously crashed onto the giants' bodies. The strength of those giants was provided by the bone patterns on their bodies. Lin Yi had absorbed a lot of it and was greatly weakened. In addition, Su Fuwu's strength was stronger than theirs. In less than 10 minutes, the bone patterns on the 6 giants' bodies had been completely dispersed by him. Bang! With a loud and clear sound, the 6 giants immediately turned into ashes, leaving only the broken power of the bone patterns in the sky. With a slight thought, Lin Yi immediately absorbed all the power of the bone lines into his body. Lin Yi had a premonition that the power of these bone patterns would be of considerable use to him. Therefore, even though Lin Yi could not use it now, he still absorbed the power of the bone pattern into his body. It was a pity that he could only use his divine thought this time and could not use his saint energy. Otherwise, he could try to combine the 3 types of energy. Rumble. After absorbing the broken bone lines, the trembling of the entire hall became even more intense and showed no signs of stopping. This scene scared the villagers so much that they didn't dare to raise their heads. They could only kowtow non-stop. Su Fuwu raised his head and stared into the distance, in the direction of the grand hall. Boom! Suddenly, bright and resplendent bone runes erupted from the entire hall. Immediately, a change occurred to the hall. With a crisp sound, the hall gradually turned into a human figure. The bone runes were engraved on its body. In the end, there was a special rune that spontaneously formed between heaven and earth. It fell from the sky and landed on its forehead. Boom! Along with the appearance of the rune, the power of all the bone patterns on the giant's body fused together. Sir, be careful. The rune on its forehead is a pseudo-divine rune. It can merge all the power of the bone patterns together. It's extremely terrifying. Su Fuwu hurriedly reminded him. Pseudo-divine rune? Even if it's a real divine rune, what's there to be afraid of? Lin Yi chuckled and waved his right hand. The divine thought immediately turned into a light screen. It flickered with lightning and protected Su Fuwu and the villagers. Although he was not afraid, he did not know how big the attack range of the divine rune was. In order to ensure the safety of Su Fuwu and the others, he had to be careful. Roar! Mortals, those who try to escape from the land of exile will be killed without mercy. A muffled sound echoed like thunder. The guardian raised his right hand. In an instant, countless amounts of energy gathered and condensed into a spear of light. The light spear contained a violent power. There was saber light, sword intent, and elemental power. Spear of victory. Heavenly thunder array. Without any hesitation, or more accurately, the guardian did not think at all. It raised its hand and threw the light spear. At the same time, its left hand waved gently. Thunder and lightning intertwined from the bone runes and fell towards Lin Yi. Too weak. Shaking his head slightly, Lin Yi pointed his index finger. The divine thought immediately turned into a fiery red power. It condensed into a phoenix and flew into the sky. Screech! Amidst the ferocious cries, raging flames burned. The phoenix flew past at extreme speed, instantly enveloping the lightning in the sky and the spear of light. In the next moment, a crisp sound was heard. It was the explosion of the lightning and the flames colliding. Even with the obstruction of the lightning, Su Fuwu saw this scene and his blood boiled. Hiss, this is a real battle. This is a true powerhouse. If only I could have this kind of strength, how good would that be? Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, Su Fuwu looked at the collision between the flames and the lightning and clenched his fists. Bang, bang, bang. In just a few breaths, the light spear burst. The lightning was swallowed by the flames. The flames of the explosion disappeared into the sea of fire. Damn it! The guardian sensed danger. The pseudo-divine rune on its forehead flashed. In an instant, all the power in its body surged and condensed into a point, condensing on the pseudo-divine rune on its forehead. Light of destruction. The pseudo-divine rune was like an eye that suddenly opened. In the next moment, all the power of the bone runes turned into a torrent and shot towards the phoenix in front of it. Interesting! The corners of Lin Ye's mouth curled up slightly. With a thought, the sea of fire disappeared. The divine thought turned into a giant silver tiger again. It roared and leaped, waving its sharp claws and slashing at the torrent of light. You want to break the surface with a single point? Then I'll show you what it means to be invincible and unstoppable. Bang! The moment the torrent of light collided with the sharp claws, the whole world shook. In the next moment, the torrent of light shattered like glass. The giant silver tiger did not stop. After it shattered the torrent of light, its body flashed, and it was in front of the guardian. It raised its sharp claws high and slashed down. End of chapter. Chapter 696. Bang, bang, bang. Crisp sounds rang out continuously. The so-called protector did not even last a breath before it was smashed into pieces by the sharp power. The pseudo-divine runes and bone runes burst out with power, but they were still unable to stop it. They all exploded, and the power within overflowed and dissipated into the air. After a while, the remnant power of the bone runes and pseudo-divine runes was all absorbed by Lin Yi. This originally incomparably luxurious palace had also turned into a pile of ruins. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Behind the palace, a passageway was faintly discernible. It's so easy to get through? Seeing this, Lin Yi was stunned. He did not expect that the Forgotten Land would strictly restrict the existence of divine runes. No matter how outstanding one's talent was, one would not be able to break through to the divine realm and would not be a match for the Protector. We finally defeated the Protector. Long live the heavenly god of thunder and fire. God, thank you for your blessings. The people in the village were still kneeling and praying. Lin Ye's face suddenly became ugly. He did not want to waste too much time on this. All right, stop praying. Let's get out of the Forgotten Land quickly. Su Fuwu sensed Lin Ye's impatience and immediately shouted. In an instant, the people in the village did not dare to continue praying. They all stood up and walked towards the passageway. Lin Yi looked at the backs of the people leaving and could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. It was too troublesome. After sending them out of the Forgotten Land, he would let them fend for themselves and no longer care about them. However, the strange power in Lin Ye's body gradually turned into pure soul power, increasing Lin Ye's strength. Soon, Lin Yi noticed this and his face became strange. He could finally confirm that the more satisfied this group of people was, the closer they were to the goal they had prayed for. That power could then be absorbed by Lin Yi. This seems to be related to faith. Phew, I really don't know what is going on with the divine realm in this world. I hope that after leaving the Forgotten Land, I can find others. Rubbing his nose, Lin Yi waited until everyone was in front of the tunnel before leading Su Fuwu to open the tunnel. The tunnel flickered with radiance, stretching as far as the eye could see. As far as the eye could see, one could only see a path of light. After sensing for a moment, Lin Yi did not sense any danger and stepped into the passageway. Su Fuwu followed closely behind. However, the people in the village started to hesitate. They were too weak to believe that they had defeated the Guardians. Thus, when they saw the passageway, they were filled with doubt. They were terrified. What if there were more dangers in the passageway? What if the passageway was a trap? Even after Lin Yi and Su Fuwu had walked a zhang away, the villagers still did not dare to move. Noticing this, Lin Ye's expression became incomparably ugly. If not for the fact that he had accepted that ball of energy and accepted the prayers of those people, he would have had the impulse to abandon them. A pitiful person must have a hateful side. At this point in time, they were still afraid. It was no wonder that they were so miserable in the Forgotten Land. Lin Yi rolled his eyes. Without waiting for Su Fuwu to urge those people, Lin Ye's divine sense had already spread out. Like a rope, it abruptly tied them up. With a slight thought, the villagers were pulled into the passageway by Lin Yi, causing everyone to exclaim in surprise. Hiss! What a strong power! Seeing this scene, Su Fuwu's heart trembled. Lin Ye's power was not something he could imagine. No more nonsense. Lin Ye's voice was cold. The villagers also felt Lin Ye's anger and did not dare to speak again. Lin Yi put everyone down, but did not disperse his divine sense. Instead, it protected the villagers. This passageway was only a ray of light. On both sides there was a bottomless abyss under their feet. If something happened, it was hard to guarantee that the villagers would not fall. If there were casualties, Lin Yi was worried that something would happen to that ball of energy. Therefore, he had to ensure everyone's safety. As for Su Fuwu, Lin Yi did not care much. If he could not even pass this hurdle, he was not qualified to follow him. Similarly, if Su Fuwu could pass this hurdle, Lin Yi would also give him a good fortune. Through absorbing the bone patterns, Lin Yi already had many deductions and guesses about the cultivation methods of this world. He also had a lot of research. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Everyone began to walk in the passageway. When they walked for a while, the light behind them began to dissipate. An endless abyss appeared and turned into all kinds of evil spirits, revealing their ferocious forms. They glared at Lin Yi and the others on the light path. Clearly, they had defeated the Guardian, and this path of light only allowed the group of people in the palace to pass through. As for the others, even if they came here, they would not be able to summon the light path again. They could only wait for the Guardian to condense again. Similarly, if something happened to the people on the light path, they would not be able to rush out. Looking at those ferocious and terrifying evil spirits, Lin Yi could not help but shake his head slightly. The mechanisms of this world were too simple and crude. If an illusion was set up, it would make people despair. After defeating the Guardian with great difficulty, there was hope of rushing out of the Forgotten Land. A beautiful illusion could trap people and make them unable to extricate themselves until their lives were exhausted. However, although these ferocious demons looked terrifying, those with a strong mind could easily pass through. Even Su Fuwu was not affected. He walked on the light path with a calm expression. However, Lin Yi and Su Fuwu were not affected, but it did not mean that the others could ignore it. Everyone in the village trembled and moved forward with difficulty. Some children even cried and did not dare to move. If it were not for the protection of the divine sense, they would have fallen down the light path many times. Aware of this, Lin Yi was completely fed up. He had already made up his mind to leave these people alone after leaving the Forgotten Land. Even if there were 1 or 2 people among them who were fearless and had a fearless spirit, Lin Yi would not abandon them. After all, Lin Yi had not fully explored that mysterious power. However, the hundreds of people in this village disappointed Lin Yi too much. However, no matter how disappointed he was, Lin Yi still had to take care of them at this time. With a slight thought, the divine sense immediately turned into a giant net and completely wrapped up the people in the village. Lin Yi waved his right hand gently. In an instant, the giant net immediately brought the people forward along the light path. After doing all this, Lin Yi turned his head to look at Su Fuwu and was surprised. Su Fuwu had entered a state of enlightenment in the light path. Interesting, this little guy actually noticed it too. Touching his nose, Lin Yi was more and more optimistic about Su Fuwu. Those evil spirits all had fake divine glyphs in their bodies. Moreover, the entire light path contained the power of the fake divine glyph. Su Fuwu had obviously noticed this, which was why he had entered a state of epiphany. End of chapter. Chapter 697. Lin Yi did not disturb Su Fuwu, nor did he protect him. He only silently stared at him, wanting to see how far Su Fuwu could go. If Su Fuwu could comprehend the pseudo-divine runes in the tunnel, it meant that his talent was exceptional. Lin Yi would not mind letting him follow him. This area was still considered part of the Forgotten Land, and there was a suppression of divine runes. If Su Fuwu could comprehend the pseudo-divine runes in this place, his future would be bright. In an instant, a strange scene appeared in the tunnel. At the front, countless people were wailing and screaming, but they were pulled forward by an invisible force. Su Fuwu's eyes were slightly closed, and he was like a walking corpse walking in the tunnel. Lin Yi yawned, constantly sensing the pseudo-divine runes around the tunnel. Because Su Fuwu was sensing the pseudo-divine runes, Lin Yi did not absorb them into his body, but observed. One had to say that the existence of the pseudo-divine runes was much stronger than the bone runes. Although the bone runes were powerful, there were too many restrictions. The existence of the pseudo-divine runes could make up for some of the flaws of the bone runes, and could even strengthen them. It was incomparably mysterious. I wonder what the divine runes will be like. I hope they won't disappoint me. Slightly shaking his head, Lin Yi did not disperse the evil spirits in the tunnel, but allowed Su Fuwu to comprehend the pseudo-divine runes. The tunnel was long, and after walking for 2 hours, the light was still boundless. At this time, the villagers finally accepted reality. They no longer wailed and silently waited in the tunnel. After another 2 hours, Su Fuwu ended his comprehension. All the bone runes in his body began to flicker. The bone runes near his chest showed signs of fusing, gradually condensing together. 1. The light flashed and the bone runes fused together, forming a pseudo-divine rune. In an instant, a strange power rippled out from Su Fuwu's chest. In just a few breaths of time, Su Fuwu's originally scattered power actually fused together. Although it was not perfect, and he could not control it as he wished, compared to before, it was much stronger. This time, Su Fuwu's cultivation level did not increase, but his strength was several times stronger. Originally, Su Fuwu could only use the power of 2 bone patterns at a time. But now, with the existence of the pseudo-divine pattern, dozens of bone patterns in his body fused together. The power that erupted was even stronger than that of an ordinary saint. Sensing this, Lin Yi could not help but frown. Quasi-divine inscriptions were already so powerful, allowing the user to unleash strength surpassing their own. If they were divine inscriptions, wouldn't they be even more powerful? For a moment, Lin Yi was even more curious about divine inscriptions. "Thank you, my lord." After forming the pseudo-divine inscription, Su Fuwu immediately turned around and bowed to Lin Yi. At the same time, Su Fuwu quietly sensed Lin Yi's strength. When he discovered that he was still unable to sense anything, his heart involuntarily shivered. Su Fuwu already understood that Lin Yi's strength, even if he broke through to deity realm, he was also far from being a match. "Your talent is not bad. If you perform well, I will give you a chance to comprehend divine inscriptions." Nodding slightly, Lin Yi's mind moved slightly, and the power of divine thought instantly turned into a huge mouth. In the next moment, a surging suction force suddenly erupted. The pseudo-divine inscriptions around the passageway were all sucked into the huge mouth, turned into pure energy, and fused into Lin Yi's body. At the same time, many pseudo-divine inscriptions appeared and fused with the bone patterns in Lin Yi's body. Seeing this scene, Su Fuwu could not help but sigh. He had only comprehended one pseudo-divine inscription after much effort, but Lin Yi had fused hundreds of pseudo-divine inscriptions with a wave of his hand. This gap was really too big. Sigh, I wonder when I will be able to have the same strength as my lord? Su Fuwu looked at Lin Yi enviously. Suddenly, the passageway trembled violently. As the pseudo-divine inscriptions that formed the passageway disappeared, the end of the light passageway finally appeared. Looking up, there was a brilliant light at the end. Raising his eyebrows, Lin Yi could not help but have a strange expression on his face. One had to comprehend the power of the pseudo-divine inscriptions to pass through this passageway. It seems that the person who left this passageway also left a way out for the Forgotten Land. If not for me, I'm afraid that even if someone in the Forgotten Land defeated the Guardian, after leaving the Forgotten Land, they would also be killed, and might not even be able to survive. With this passageway, once you comprehend the power of the pseudo-divine inscriptions, you will still have the power to fight after leaving. You won't fall too far behind, and you might even be able to slowly develop. After understanding this point, Lin Yi shook his head slightly. Without hesitation, he led Su Fuwu and the other villagers to the end of the passageway. With Lin Yi around, the passageway was almost unrestricted. Soon, Lin Yi and the rest had reached the end, and they rushed into the light door. Buzz! Everyone felt dizzy, and in the next moment, a strong force squeezed their bodies, causing them to feel excruciating pain. Even Lin Yi was frowning. Fortunately, his body was formed by the power of divine sense, and he immediately activated the five spirits' divine technique to convert the power of divine sense to the water attribute. In an instant, all the pain disappeared. Lin Ye's vision turned black, and in the next moment, he felt solid ground beneath his feet. He opened his eyes abruptly, and the sun was bright but dazzling. Hiss! What a big sun! This aura! Oh my God, it's a big tree! It's grass! In an instant, everyone in the village was excited, and they cheered wildly. The surroundings were filled with flowers and trees, and it was very peaceful. Even Su Fuwu's emotions fluctuated when he saw this scene. In the Forgotten Land, it was a barren land filled with ruins and withered land. Where could there be flowers and trees? Therefore, when they saw this scene, everyone was so surprised. The power in this space has also changed. Lin Yi stretched out his hand and felt the aura in the space. He realized that there was a power that was not inferior to the saint energy. That power was very similar to the pseudo-divine runes, but it was different from the bone runes and the pseudo-divine runes. It was contained in the heaven and earth. Could it be that this is the divine rune? If that's the case, the divine runes and the saint energy are of the same level, but I don't know if they can be merged together. Nodding slightly, Lin Yi closed his eyes and felt the aura in the air. Seeing that Lin Yi was cultivating, Su Fuwu did not dare to disturb him, and he immediately shouted to the villagers to stop making noise. After 10 minutes, Lin Yi opened his eyes, and he was shocked. After feeling the aura in the air, Lin Yi was surprised to find that it was the power of sealing. End of chapter. Chapter 698. Buzz! Purple light flowed between heaven and earth, forming a rune in the air. This is the power of the divine rune. Su Fuwu exclaimed. Oh my God, how is this possible? You just arrived here, how can you comprehend the divine rune? Divine runes were different from false divine runes and bone runes in that they had to be comprehended from heaven and earth. Moreover, there were many restrictions. Lin Yi had just arrived in this world, and had only meditated for a short while. Yet, he was able to comprehend the power of the divine rune from heaven and earth, and form the divine rune. Su Fuwu could not believe it. Buzz! Light flashed, and the divine rune slowly entered Lin Ye's body under Su Fuwu's astonished gaze. In an instant, Lin Yi felt as if his entire body had been upgraded. Even his soul and spiritual force had been greatly enhanced. Hiss! It seems like the power of the divine rune and spiritual force can coexist. It probably won't repel saint power. This time, everyone who enters Sky Market will be able to comprehend the power of the divine rune. We've struck it rich. At this moment, Lin Yi finally felt the enhancement that Sky Market had given them. Opening his eyes, Lin Yi glanced at Su Fuwu and said, "Don't be surprised. Once I understand this divine rune, I'll let you study it." "Thank you, sir." Hearing this, Su Fuwu was ecstatic. The divine rune was the power extracted from heaven and earth. Everyone's understanding of power was different, and the power of the divine rune they comprehended was also different. Generally speaking, even if they were master and disciple, they would not easily reveal their divine rune. After all, the divine rune contained your power, including your strengths, weaknesses, and weaknesses. Once someone studied it, it was equivalent to handing over your life to others. One could comprehend many bone runes and false divine runes, but many people could only comprehend a few divine runes. Those who could comprehend more than 7 divine runes were peerless geniuses that were hard to come by in a million years. Those who could comprehend more than 9 divine runes were overlords even in the 9 state. As for those who could comprehend more than 9 divine runes, they only existed in legends. Hence, Su Fu was very grateful that Lin Yi was willing to let him study the divine inscriptions. Slightly nodding, Lin Yi got up and glanced at everyone in the village. He then said in a deep voice, "I've done what I promised you. Thank you, Lord God. Thank you, Lord God." After he finished speaking, everyone in the village bowed respectfully. Within Lin Ye's body, that ball of light suddenly appeared and actually turned into a rain of flowers that filled the sky, sprinkling down. Buzz. As the flower petals rained down, the auras of everyone in the village increased by more than 2-fold. This, everyone was overjoyed. They thought that it was Lin Ye's credit, so they kowtowed again. Even Su Fu was shocked. He could feel that his strength was increasing at an astonishing rate. In less than 10 minutes, Su Fu's aura had already reached the peak of the heavenly being realm. As long as he could comprehend a divine mark, he could break through to the legendary deity realm. This made Su Fu extremely excited. That was the realm that he had always dreamed of. Lin Yi also did not expect that after completing the prayers of everyone in the village, there would be a change in the energy. The flower petals were not only effective on Su Fu and the rest. Lin Yi also felt an increase in strength. His divine will quietly stabilized at the peak of level 59. In this way, Lin Yi was completely confident that he could break through to level 60 in the sky market world. After absorbing the energy of the flower petals, Lin Yi was still a little worried. After carefully sensing for a long time and confirming that the energy in the flower petals was extremely pure, he was finally relieved. If this group of people had a little backbone and could use their special abilities to condense such energy, I would have chosen to bring them along. Unfortunately, although Lin Yi was very interested in the mysterious energy, this group of people really disappointed him. Slightly shaking his head, Lin Yi glanced at everyone in the village and said indifferently, "Get up. I've already done what I promised you. Since you've left the Forgotten Land, you should find your own place. Leave." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone in the village was stunned. They all knelt down and kowtowed again. God of Heaven, are you abandoning us? God of Heaven, we want to follow you. We'll serve you forever. Along with the sound of the prayer, another ball of light filled with a special power condensed and floated in front of Lin Yi. However, this time Lin Yi was not moved. On the contrary, he was furious. "You are really too disappointing." With a cold expression, Lin Yi waved his hand and broke the ball of light. He shouted coldly, "You're really too stupid to place your hopes on others." As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Yi did not linger. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Su Fu, speeding off into the distance. Only the people in the village were left in a daze. Their faces were filled with astonishment. They could not believe that Lin Yi would reject them so straightforwardly. As a matter of fact, Lin Yi did not want to part with them so soon. After all, they had just left the Forgotten Land and their strength was too weak. Since Lin Yi had already decided to be a good person, he might as well help them all the way until they were safe. However, the group of people had disappointed Lin Yi too much. He left in a fit of anger. As for whether they lived or died, it would depend on luck. Su Fu, who was being carried by Lin Yi, rolled his eyes. He had already figured out Lin Yi's temper. This caused him to be terrified. Luckily, he did not ask for anything out of line. On the contrary, he had displayed his outstanding ability, which made Lin Yi decide to bring him along. A moment later, a small island appeared in his sight. There were many buildings on the island, with many fake divine runes scattered around. It was obvious that there were people on the island. Realizing this, Lin Yi immediately sped up and rushed toward the island. Not long after, Lin Yi and Su Fu landed on the island. They saw a chain that extended toward the mountain range that they had just come from. Beside the chain, there was a stone tablet with a few big words carved on it. Forbidden Land. Lin Yi frowned slightly and said in a low voice, "The place that we just came out of seems to be the Forbidden Land? This should be a force. Perhaps it is related to the Forgotten Land." Lin Yi rolled his eyes and immediately understood this point. He immediately led Su Fu and continued forward. Soon, several guards in tight clothes appeared and were guarding a teleportation spell. "Who are you? Who are you? How dare you trespass on the forbidden land of the Violet Rainbow Island?" Almost instantaneously, the guards also noticed Lin Yi and Su Fu, and they all shouted out, glaring angrily at the two. Su Fu could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Lin Yi, on the other hand, walked toward the guards calmly. "Do you want to die? Stand there." The guards' faces darkened. Suddenly, a bright light shone from their bodies. That was a fake divine rune. End of chapter. Chapter 699. What? They are only in the soul movement realm. How can they comprehend the pseudo-sacred runes? Su Fu cried out in surprise. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the guards. Although it was impossible to comprehend the pseudo-sacred runes in the Forgotten Land, it was recorded in the ancient books that even in the outside world, the pseudo-sacred runes could only be comprehended after a certain realm. Beginners could not withstand the power of the sacred runes and could only cultivate the bone runes. However, these guards were not very strong, but they had comprehended the pseudo-sacred runes. This shocked him. "Don't make a fuss." Lin Yi waved his right hand and ignored the guards. They were just pseudo-sacred runes. Even if they had comprehended the sacred runes, what could they do to him? "You are courting death." Seeing that Lin Yi did not stop, the guards' faces turned cold. They shouted and the pseudo-sacred runes on their bodies exploded. Numerous sharp wind blades pierced through the air and attacked Lin Yi. Clang! However, the moment the wind blade came into contact with Lin Yi, it dissipated, causing the guards to be incomparably shocked. How can this be? With furrowed brows, the guards once again unleashed their false divine inscriptions. This time around, the color of the wind blades was several times deeper than the previous one. The wind blades were like sharp blades, slamming into Lin Yi's body. Bang bang bang! However, the result was the same. The wind blades could not even stop Lin Yi's footsteps and turned into fragments. Not good, a strong enemy is attacking. Quickly release the signal flare. The guards' faces changed, and they took out a cylindrical object from their chest. "You dare to call for help?" Su Fu's eyes turned cold. He had already calmed down. He knew that these guards were weak. He immediately put his hands together and a silver moon flashed across the guard's arms. In the next moment, screams rang out. The guard's arms were broken and fell to the ground. Whoosh! However, one of the signal flare was still activated. It rushed into the air and exploded into bright fireworks. "Damn it! I don't care who you are. How dare you barge into the Violet Rainbow Island? Only death awaits you." The guards held their broken arms and their faces twisted in pain. They glared at Lin Yi and Su Fu. "As long as the elders are here, you will die." "Sir, how should we deal with them?" Su Fu asked softly. At this moment, he had completely calmed down. "Wait." Lin Yi looked into the distance and narrowed his eyes in anticipation. He could sense a powerful aura in the distance. Hearing this, Su Fu was slightly taken aback. Soon after, he quietly stood behind Lin Yi. He was full of confidence in Lin Yi's strength. Not long after, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. Raising his head to look, he was shocked to see several figures rushing over from afar like lightning. Lin Yi focused and felt the footsteps of those people. He suddenly realized that although they were powerful and their energy fluctuations were comparable to that of a sage, their physiques were very weak. They were even weaker than those in the creation realm. Even when they were rushing, they were relying on the power of the divine inscriptions. They did not rely on their physique or saint power. The third elder is here. Ha ha ha, with the third elder here, this group of people can't escape. When they turned their heads around, the guards were overjoyed. Their eyes were filled with killing intent as they looked at Lin Yi and Su Fuwu. Especially Su Fuwu. His arms had been cut off. Their hearts were filled with hatred. If not for the fact that they knew they were no match for Su Fuwu, they would have rushed forward. Shut up! Su Fuwu's face turned cold as he glared at the guards. Being glared at by Su Fuwu, the guards felt their hair stand on end. They could feel the cold, murderous intent. They kept retreating and distanced themselves from Su Fuwu. They then realized that Su Fuwu was powerful. Although he was not as powerful as the elders, it would be easy for him to kill them. Su Fuwu's face was gloomy. If it wasn't for the fact that Lin Yi didn't say anything, he would have already killed these noisy guards. Buzz! The divine inscriptions exploded. 3 figures stepped on the light of the divine inscriptions and landed in front of Lin Yi and Su Fuwu. Who are you? Why are you trespassing on the forbidden area of Violet Rainbow Island? The 3 elders' faces darkened as they stared at Lin Yi and Su Fuwu. Soon, the expressions of the 3 elders turned strange. Su Fuwu was not weak, but to them, he was not worth mentioning. He was only at the peak of the celestial realm. He had not even comprehended the divine inscriptions. Any one of them could crush him. However, they could not underestimate Lin Yi. They could feel that there was a power in Lin Yi's body that made them tremble. What made them even more afraid was that they could not sense Lin Yi's exact cultivation level. Even if someone was stronger than them, they could roughly sense their opponent's strength. However, Lin Yi gave them the feeling that he was like an abyss in the sea. He was unpredictable. Therefore, they did not dare to act rashly. If there was only Su Fuwu, they would not even say a word. They would just kill him directly. You are not qualified to know my identity. Lin Yi stepped forward and asked calmly, "Where is this place?" Hearing this, the 3 elders looked at each other with astonishment. Boy, you don't even know about Violet Rainbow Island. Humph, since you came here by accident, leave quickly. We will not pursue this matter with you. The 3 elders' faces darkened as they spoke. Elder. The guards' faces changed slightly. They quickly shouted, "Elder, these 2 people walked out of the forbidden area. They must have stolen something from Violet Rainbow Island. And they even chopped off our arms. Elder, you must avenge us." As they spoke, the guards glared at Su Fuwu angrily. "Shut up!" Hearing the guards' shouts, the 3 elders' faces turned cold as they shouted angrily. One of the elders rolled his eyes and noticed the coldness on Lin Yi's face. He suddenly attacked. The divine inscriptions turned into several sharp daggers and slit the necks of the guards. Poochie! Elder! Their necks were slashed by the dagger. The bodies of the guards trembled as they stared at the elder in shock. Soon after, their bodies fell heavily to the ground. How cruel! Su Fuwu frowned and stared at the 3 elders. He felt a chill in his heart. He didn't expect that the 3 elders would even kill their own people. In addition to being surprised, Su Fuwu had more confidence in Lin Yi's strength. Just by standing there, he was able to force the 3 deity realm experts to kill their own people to appease Lin Yi's anger. What realm was Lin Yi's strength at? End of chapter. Chapter 700. The 3 elders of Violet Rainbow Island stared at Lin Yi with gloomy faces. They could sense that Lin Yi's strength was shocking. Therefore, they would rather kill a few guards than become enemies with Lin Yi. Of course, this did not mean that they were afraid of Lin Yi. They just did not want to get into trouble. Brother, they were the ones who provoked you. Now that they are dead, if there is nothing else, please leave this place as soon as possible. The elder in the middle said, Violet Rainbow Island does not welcome outsiders. Phew, Lin Yi heaved a sigh of relief and said, Did you not hear what I said? I will say it one last time. Tell me, where is this place? Hearing this, the three elders' smiles disappeared. They glared at Lin Yi and said coldly, Brother, don't think that we are easy to talk to. This is Violet Rainbow Island. If you want to cause trouble, Violet Rainbow Island will not be afraid. The three elders stared at Lin Yi angrily. Although Violet Rainbow Island was not very famous, it was still well known. Even many true gods did not dare to act presumptuously here. Lin Yi asked them where they were in Violet Rainbow Island, which made them angry. It seems that you are not going to listen to reason. Lin Ye's eyebrows twitched. His voice was cold. Behind Lin Yi, Su Fuwu's mouth twitched. He suddenly felt sorry for the three elders. Su Fuwu guessed that Lin Yi was not from this world, and did not know where this place was. He just wanted to ask for directions. However, the three elders didn't know that this place was Purple Rainbow Island, but Lin Yi didn't want to know the name of their sect, but the name of this area. The topics that they were talking about were not on the same channel. The three elders did not know and thought that Lin Yi was playing with them. Damn it, third elder, let's fight it out with him. That's right. Although our Violet Rainbow Island isn't a peak force, when have we ever suffered such humiliation? They actually dared to toy with us. If I don't kill them, I won't be able to vent the hatred in my heart. The three elders glowered at Lin Yi, as the power of the divine inscriptions gushed forth from their bodies. Tens of divine inscriptions shimmered with resplendent light, revolving around the three of them. Their strength wasn't weak, and each of them had already comprehended 3 to 4 types of divine inscriptions. This caused Su Fuwu to be slightly taken aback. You want to fight? Raising an eyebrow, Lin Yi took a step forward. The divine sense in his body surged and suddenly enveloped the three elders. Of course, the three elders didn't know that. They only felt a chill on their backs, but they didn't see the specific power. Attack! Our Violet Rainbow Island can't stand such humiliation. The third elder glared at Huang Xiaolong, raising his right hand. In the blink of an eye, a divine rune transformed into a giant flaming dragon, roaring as it charged towards Lin Yi. Sharp daggers appeared all over the sky, and like raindrops, they crazily fell towards Lin Yi. A giant wolf appeared and waved its sharp claws, creating a sonic boom. Buzz! However, before the attack landed, the divine sense that had enveloped the three elders suddenly appeared. Lightning radiated from it, and in an instant, countless electric arcs burst forth. Crackle! Lightning flashed, and the surging divine sense broke through all the attacks of the divine inscriptions, crashing into the three elders. Bang! In an instant, the three elders felt as if they had been hit in the chest by a giant hammer, and they were immediately sent flying, spitting out blood. They had cultivated the divine inscriptions, and their mental strength was extremely strong. However, their physical bodies were too weak. Although Lin Ye's physical body was formed by the divine sense, the power of the lightning was no less harmful to his physical body. Moreover, their strength was only at the middle stage of the Saint Realm, and the gap between them and Lin Yi was too great. They couldn't withstand the attack at all. They didn't die immediately because Lin Yi had shown them mercy. However, even though that was the case, the three elders were still extremely shocked as they looked at Lin Yi in shock. You? Who are you? Are you here to seek revenge on Violet Rainbow Island? The three elders curled up their bodies and kept retreating. They looked at Lin Yi with fear in their eyes. When they thought of the possibility that Lin Yi was here to seek revenge, their faces turned ghastly pale. Seek revenge? Lin Yi laughed coldly. I have no quarrel with you. Few, on account of your strength, I will give you one more chance. Tell me, where is this? If you don't speak, you can only be reunited in hell. When they heard that, the 3 elders' faces changed. One of them gritted his teeth and said, Bastard, I would rather die than be humiliated by you. That's right, there are no cowards in Violet Rainbow Island. We would rather die than be humiliated. As they spoke, 2 of the elders looked at each other. They raised their hands, which were shining with divine inscriptions, and slapped their own heads. Stop! Suddenly, there was a thunderous roar. When the 2 elders heard that voice, they were overjoyed and lowered their hands. Lin Yi and Su Fuwu looked up and saw a figure floating towards them from afar. The figure was covered in purple divine inscriptions and could not be seen clearly. However, the power of the purple divine inscriptions gave Su Fuwu a familiar feeling. Who are you? Why are you trespassing on Violet Rainbow Island? The person shouted. You have hurt the elders of my island. Apologize now. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving. Oh! Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and glanced at the purple divine inscriptions. He suddenly laughed and said, Interesting. If you think that you can trap me, you can try. Island Master, be careful. This guy is very powerful. When the 3 elders heard that, they reminded Su Mo, I understand. Divine inscriptions. Seal. As he shouted, the purple divine inscriptions spread out like a giant net and wrapped around Lin Yi and Su Fuwu. Su Fuwu felt a chill in his heart. He quickly took a few steps back and hid behind Lin Yi. Lin Yi did not dodge. Instead, he took a step forward and faced the purple divine inscriptions. Is this guy courting death? Seeing this scene, the 3 elders, including their island master, were all stunned. They looked at Lin Yi with astonishment. Since this guy is so arrogant and dares to take the initiative to face the purple divine inscriptions, he can't blame anyone. Then, the 3 elders began to snicker coldly. Only the supreme headmaster frowned. An ominous premonition arose in his heart. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Suddenly, the purple divine patterns that filled the sky rippled and actually condensed, transforming into a round ball that spun on Lin Ye's finger. What's going on? The 3 elders were stunned and stood rooted to the ground. Their faces were filled with disbelief. No, why can't I control the divine inscriptions? The island master was shocked. When he looked up, his pupils constricted and he exclaimed, My divine inscriptions seal. End of chapter. Chapter 701. Be ****, what did you do? The island master gritted his teeth and glared at Lin Yi. Give me back my divine rune. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and twirled his index finger with a smile. The purple divine rune on his index finger formed a ball and spun continuously. Su Fuwu swallowed his saliva and looked at Lin Ye's back. His heart was filled with respect. He did not expect the divine rune to be so obedient in Lin Ye's hands. The divine rune was something that even heavenly gods could not fully control. They could only use its power. However, Lin Yi was actually able to make the power of the divine inscriptions so obedient. This was truly astonishing. Su Fuwu was not the only one who was surprised. The island master and the 3 elders were terrified. They did not expect that an expert of Lin Ye's level would appear in front of them. Lin Yi said indifferently, It's just a divine rune of sealing. It's not like I don't have it. As he spoke, Lin Yi raised his left hand and another purple divine rune appeared. That divine rune was the one that Lin Yi had comprehended after coming out of the passageway. You impossible! How can you have the divine rune of sealing? Could it be that you are also from the guardian tribe? As he spoke, the island master realized that he had said something wrong and quickly covered his mouth. However, he still stared at Lin Yi. However, this time, the enmity in his eyes was much less. Guardian tribe? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and suddenly thought of a possibility. This violet rainbow island was so close to the passageway out of the Forgotten Land. Could it be a tribe that was responsible for guarding the passageway of the Forgotten Land? If the seal of the passageway was not stable, it could be reinforced so that the Forgotten Land would be sealed forever. With this thought and the island master's words, Lin Yi was certain. It's just a divine rune of sealing. Isn't it easy to comprehend it? Lin Yi said indifferently, "You are the island master of Violet Rainbow Island? Not bad." The island master nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, "I'm the island master, Fan Shiji. What are you doing here on Purple Rainbow Island?" "I'm just passing by." Lin Yi rubbed his nose, then suddenly grinned and said, "Since you're the island master, then it's easy to handle. Tell me, where is this place? Otherwise, I'll send everyone on your island to hell." "What is this place?" Frowning slightly, Fan Shiji sensed that something was amiss. Even the third elder was stunned. Right now, Lin Yi clearly knew that this was Purple Rainbow Island, so why did he still ask where this place was? Could it be that Lin Yi really didn't know and wasn't playing with them? While Fan Shiji and the third elder were hesitating, the other two elders were so angry that they roared, "Bastard, you want to play and humiliate the people of Violet Rainbow Island? Dream on." Cough cough. Su Fu coughed and said abruptly, You've all misunderstood. What my lord meant was, where is this place?" "What?" Hearing Su Fu's words, the island master and the third elder's lips twitched. Indeed, they had guessed correctly. It wasn't that Lin Yi was playing with them, but that they had misunderstood Lin Ye's meaning. However, what made them depressed was that there was someone who didn't even know about the Nine Heavens state. You're lying, right?" The two elders were also stunned and looked at Lin Yi in shock. Huff, the island master, rolled his eyes and said in a deep voice, "This is the easternmost land of the Fireworm State." "Fireworm State? Is the Divine Fire Academy still around?" Hearing that, Su Fu asked abruptly. "The Divine Fire Academy still exists, and it's still an overlord." Speaking of this, the island master and the rest of them had a solemn look on their faces. The Divine Fire Academy was the #1 overlord in the Fireworm State, and no one dared to offend it. Even the Violet Rainbow Island was like a child in front of the Divine Fire Academy. "Why didn't you just say it earlier?" Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and continued to ask, "Is your Violet Rainbow Island related to the Forgotten Land?" "Forgotten Land? How is that possible?" "The Forgotten Land is a place where all the sinners of the 9 heavens' 10 lands are imprisoned. How could it be related to our Violet Rainbow Island?" As soon as he said that, the 3 elders laughed bitterly. "It would be great if we could really manage the Forgotten Land." Only Fan Shiji wore a wry smile. "I didn't ask you." Sensing Fan Shiji's bitter smile, Lin Yi stared at Fan Shiji and said in a deep voice, "Tell me, what is your relationship with the Forgotten Land?" "All right." Fan Shiji glanced at Lin Yi and felt the cold murderous intent in Lin Ye's eyes. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Actually, I am a descendant of the Guardian clan. Our mission is to strengthen the seal of the passage and guard it at the same time. If someone escapes from the Forgotten Land, we kill him. Of course, if he can comprehend the divine runes in a short time, we don't need to care." As expected. Nodding slightly, Lin Yi said in a deep voice, "Then do you know where the other descendants of the Guardian clan are?" "I don't know." Fan Shiji laughed bitterly. "Back then, after our ancestors received the mission, they left their homeland and came here to establish a force. Now, thousands of years have passed. How can we still know about the past?" "Few then forget it." Lin Yi touched his nose and continued to ask, "In this so-called Fireworm State, how is your Violet Rainbow Island strength?" "First rate." 2 of the elders said proudly, "There are not many forces that can defeat our Violet Rainbow Island." "Phew, then this Fireworm State is really weak." Lin Yi sighed. In an instant, the 3 elders and Fan Shiji's faces turned ugly. They wanted to refute, but when they thought of Lin Ye's terrifying strength, they didn't dare to speak. Lin Ye was right. They were indeed too weak. One person suppressed their entire sect. How is your strength in the fireworm state? Lin Yi glanced at Fan Shiji and saw that he was about the invincible saint realm. He immediately asked, "How many people are stronger than you?" On the surface, there are a total of 5 people who have reached the true God realm. Fan Shiji laughed bitterly, but secretly there are about 20 people. Many of the sect's ancestors are breaking through to the true God realm. No one knows if they have succeeded. Even our great elder is breaking through outside, and we don't know if he is alive or dead. The true God realm should be the great sage realm. There are only 20 or so. It seems that with the strength of Night Een and the others, they can dominate this world. Frowning slightly, Lin Yi said in a deep voice, "I plan to rest here for 2 days. Help me do something. If you do well, I can give you some benefits." End of chapter. Chapter 702. What is it? Fan Shiji looked at Lin Yi in confusion and laughed bitterly. "Sir, you are so powerful. Why do you need our help?" "Cut the crap. Just do what I ask you to do," Lin Yi said in a deep voice. "First, help me find more books about cultivation. Second, help me find some people. They are about the same age as me. Every one of them has the strength of the true God realm. It is rare to see such people in the fireworm state. If there are any, you will definitely find them." Hiss! Hearing this, Fan Shiji and the 3 elders looked at each other and sucked in a breath of cold air. The true God realm was a realm that they had been hoping to reach for hundreds of years. However, Lin Ye's words hit them hard. A group of people who had broken through to the true God realm at such a young age. A group. "Sir, may I ask if you came from above the 9th heaven?" Fan Shiji suddenly asked through gritted teeth. "Is the passage above the 9th heaven still open?" Above the 9th heaven? Lin Yi frowned slightly and turned to look at Su Fuwu, only to see that Su Fuwu also had a surprised expression on his face. According to the books that Su Fuwu had read, the 9 states was the peak. The God realm was the supreme expert. When did another above the 9th heaven appear? Could it be that it was another region that had split off in the past tens of thousands of years? Yeah, this place, even true God realm powerhouses are so rare. It should be that celestial deity realm powerhouses all went to another world. Su Fuwu was surprised, but he was not sure. After noticing Lin Ye's question, he immediately shook his head. "Phew, what is above the 9th heaven?" Lin Yi touched his nose and said softly, "Tell me everything you know." Fan Shiji suddenly understood when he heard Lin Ye's answer. Lin Yi did not know what was above the 9th heaven. He sighed and replied, 10,000 years ago, all the experts in the 9 states who had reached the true God realm, including the God realm experts, went to explore the depths of the starry sky. However, they never came back. We never heard from them again. We thought that they had all met with mishaps. But 6,000 years ago, powerful experts emerged from the depths of the starry sky. They spread shocking news that there were other worlds on the other side of the starry sky. Those experts from before attacked that world. However, there were very strict requirements to enter that world. Either they have extraordinary aptitude and can light up the path to the stars, following the path opened up by the ancients and safely tread the path. Or, I can only carve out a path in the endless starry sky. What kind of pressure is the starry sky? Even celestial gods wouldn't dare to say that they could kill their way through it. Thus, even though we know of the existence of that world, we don't dare to rashly go there. Those who can go there are all outstanding figures in the 9 prefectures. After another few thousand years, several mighty figures of the 9 states contacted the people on the other side of the starry sky. They used supreme treasures to open up a brand new passageway and sent their respective forces over. However, opening up the passageway requires a huge amount of energy. As more and more experts arrived on the other side of the starry sky, no one in the 9 states could open up the passageway anymore. This time, seeing how powerful you are and how young you are, we thought that you came from the 9 heavens on the other side of the starry sky. Speaking of this, Fan Shiji couldn't help but sigh. Lin Yi finally understood why the so-called 9 prefectures was so weak. A mere saint could become the leader of a force. The great sage was even an overlord. It was truly shocking. After all, the great sage's strength was barely enough to be an elder in the world he came from. The 9 heavens. Their strength should be between the heavenly saint and the absolute saint. Few, no matter what, it seems to be slightly weaker than our world. If there's a chance, I can go to the 9 heavens to take a look and find out their strength. Narrowing his eyes, Lin Yi had a question in his heart. This sky market was clearly a world created by the top experts of the 4 forces. Why did it have a complete worldview and a brand new cultivation system? It didn't feel like a world that was created. Instead, it felt like they had come to a world that had existed for a long time. However, Lin Yi didn't have any evidence at the moment. He could only suppress these thoughts in his heart and wait until he got out to tell the elders and the others. Sir, what else do you need us to do next? Fan Shiji asked curiously. No need. Lin Yi said in a low voice, go and find the traces of the others. Remember, once you find them, you must inform me immediately. Don't have anything to do with them. Also, bring me all the books about cultivation. Yes. Fan Shiji and the others hurriedly responded. They didn't dare to reject Lin Yi at all. Lin Yi was too powerful. They didn't dare to resist as they were afraid that Lin Yi would attack them. Not long after, Lin Yi and Su Fu were escorted to Violet Rainbow Island by Fan Shiji and the 3 elders. When the disciples on the island saw this scene, they were all stunned. They kept guessing the identity of Lin Yi and Su Fu. Fan Shiji and the others were really terrified. They arranged the best room for Lin Yi. As soon as they sat down, a disciple brought them the books about cultivation. The disciples were especially curious and kept looking at Lin Yi and Su Fu. In their opinion, Lin Yi and Su Fu's cultivation level was high. Why would they need to read the most basic cultivation books? After taking the books, Lin Yi gave another order and chased everyone out. Few after Fan Shiji and the others left, Lin Ye's mind moved slightly and the power of his divine consciousness immediately enveloped the entire room. The purple power of the divine rune appeared and floated in front of Su Fu. Sir, this is? Su Fu swallowed a mouthful of saliva in surprise. This is the divine rune. Try and see if you can comprehend it. Lin Yi said indifferently, your cultivation level has already reached the bottleneck. After comprehending the power of the divine rune, you should be able to break through to the divine state. Thank you, sir. Su Fu's heart was filled with gratitude. Initially, he had thought that Lin Yi would wait for him to do a few more things, or at least pay a higher price before handing over the divine inscriptions to him. Who would have thought that Lin Yi was so generous? After breaking through to the divine state, I also have something for you to do. With a wave of his right hand, Lin Yi flipped through various books and seriously comprehended the cultivation system of this world. Different from the Forgotten Land, any cultivator in the 9 prefectures could comprehend the power of the divine rune between heaven and earth. However, when they were weak, their bodies couldn't withstand it and could only absorb the pseudo-divine runes. As for the bone runes, they had long abandoned them. Only a few unique treasured techniques could catch their attention. End of chapter. Chapter 703. The divine inscriptions were the cultivation system of this world that had existed for hundreds of thousands of years. They were extremely profound. Lin Yi spent 10 days trying to understand them. However, Lin Yi did not realize that when he was looking at the various divine inscriptions, he had unintentionally merged all the divine inscriptions into his body. In the normal cultivation system, everyone could only merge a few types of divine inscriptions. According to historical records, the most talented person could only merge 9 types of divine inscriptions. That was the limit. However, Lin Yi had unknowingly merged all the divine inscriptions recorded in the book into his body. The pseudo-divine inscriptions and bone pattern fragments that he had previously comprehended had all evolved and improved. There were even some that had evolved into complete precious skills. Lin Yi did not realize this. In his heart, he was completely captivated by the complete cultivation system. Hiss! With such a complete system, there is an 80% chance that this world is the real world. Could it be that this is the other continent that Biluo mentioned? Or is it the world of my cheap master? No, the strength of this world is too weak. A mere sage is called a god here. Even the god of heaven is only comparable to a heavenly sage. I'm afraid that Elder Bai alone could sweep across the continent. It is definitely not the world of Biluo and the rest. If this is really a new world, then it will be interesting. After muttering to himself, Lin Yi had a rough understanding of this world. He put down the book and walked out. He spread out his divine sense and immediately sensed the situation on Violet Rainbow Island. There were still people guarding the forbidden area. The rest were patrolling the island. As for Fan Shiji and the rest, there was no trace of them. Su Fuwu, who had followed him out, was cultivating at the side and comprehending the power of the divine inscriptions. It had to be said that Su Fuwu's talent was not bad. In 10 days, he had comprehended the divine inscriptions. His aura was surging and he could break through to the divine state at any time. Sensing this point, Lin Xueyu's spiritual sense instantly enveloped Su Fuwu, as traces of divine inscriptions started to appear around Su Fuwu. Boom! Like a flood that was about to pour out, the moment Su Fuwu came into contact with the power of the divine inscriptions, the bone inscriptions and pseudo-divine inscriptions in his body all started to tremble, and then they cleansed and acted as his body. All of the bone runes fused together, turning into a brand new power, enshrouding his body. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The surging energy continued to surge, and a moment later, a purple divine inscription appeared on Su Fuwu's body. As Su Fuwu broke through to the divine realm, his energy rippled out like a tidal wave, causing the entire Violet Rainbow Island to tremble violently. Shwa! Su Fuwu's eyes snapped open as divine runes appeared within his body, releasing a terrifying pressure. However, in front of Lin Yi, that pressure was completely useless. When Su Fuwu saw Lin Yi, he hurriedly dispersed the divine inscriptions, and the pressure instantly dissipated. Thank you for your help, sir. Su Fuwu stood up and revealed a fawning smile. According to his original progress, he still needed a few more days to break through. The moment Su Fuwu opened his eyes, he figured out the reason for the sudden surge of power. It's nothing. Lin Yi nodded slightly. Have you been cultivating for the past few days? Not really. Su Fuwu said in a low voice. A few days ago, I was just comprehending the divine inscriptions. 4 days ago, I started to break through. Not bad. I have seen the cultivation in your world. Those who can comprehend the power of the divine inscriptions and successfully condense them within a month are considered geniuses. It seems that your talent is not bad. Lin Yi revealed a shocked expression and then asked, Then do you know where Fan Shiji and the rest are now? Sir, Fan Shiji and the rest have obeyed your orders and are outside scouting for information. Su Fuwu blinked and said in a low voice, It's been almost half a month, they should be back soon. I hope they can get some useful information. Lightly nodding his head, Lin Yi cast a glance at Su Fuwu. When he saw that Su Fuwu had only comprehended a single type of divine inscription, he immediately condensed a few more types of divine inscriptions for Su Fuwu to comprehend. However, when Su Fuwu saw the densely packed divine inscriptions on Lin Ye's body, His entire body froze, and his face was filled with disbelief. See, sir, you actually comprehended so many types of divine inscriptions? 1 type, 3 types, 9 types, 10 types. Heavens! Sir, how did you comprehend more than 10 types of divine inscriptions? Su Fuwu was stunned, and his mouth was slightly open. Even an egg could be stuffed into his mouth. I comprehended so many divine inscriptions? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows slightly, but he did not notice anything strange. Just now, he subconsciously wanted Su Fuwu to understand more about the divine inscriptions. Looking down, Lin Yi was also shocked. He saw that Su Fuwu's body was covered by densely packed divine inscriptions, and it was impossible to see how many there were. It was no wonder that Su Fuwu was shocked. Isn't it said that everyone can comprehend at most 9 types of divine inscriptions? How did I comprehend so many? Frowning, Lin Yi was rather surprised. He did not know when these divine inscriptions had merged into his body. Wait a minute, Su Fuwu swallowed a mouthful of saliva and suddenly asked, Sir, it seems that half a month ago, in the Forgotten Land, you were still learning the bone inscriptions. That's right. Lin Yi lightly nodded his head. In other words, in just 10 days, sir, you actually comprehended hundreds, or even thousands of types of divine inscriptions. Heavens, according to the ancient records, there are only 300 types of divine inscriptions in the entire Jiuzhou continent. Even after tens of thousands of years of development, there are at most 1,000 types of divine inscriptions. Could it be that, sir, you have comprehended all of the divine inscriptions? Su Fuwu was stunned. In his heart, he had completely made up his mind that even if he died, he would follow Lin Yi. He had a premonition that if he could follow Lin Yi, perhaps his life would undergo a huge change. Such a monstrous and terrifying existence, even if he could only follow him for a few months, it would be a huge improvement for him. Not to mention other things, just in this half a month, not only did he escape from the Forgotten Land, but his cultivation level had also increased by leaps and bounds, breaking through to the divine realm. Now, with so many divine inscriptions for him to comprehend, he was confident that he could make another breakthrough in a short period of time. This was the benefit that Lin Yi had given him. I think, when I was looking at the cultivation history of this world, I unintentionally merged all of the divine inscriptions that were born into my body. Touching his nose, Lin Yi guessed. Other than this possibility, Lin Yi could not find any other reason. Just by looking at the cultivation history once, you were able to merge all of the divine inscriptions into your body. Sir, you are indeed a genius. Su Fuwu hurriedly flattered Lin Yi, but very quickly he was surprised again. However, in the cultivation system, everyone can only comprehend 9 types of divine inscriptions. Sir, how did you break through this point? End of chapter. Chapter 704. The power of the divine inscriptions was extremely strong. Even the legendary Heavenly God Realm experts could only contain 9 types of divine inscriptions. Su Fuwu was shocked by the divine inscriptions on Lin Ye's body, and he was envious of him. If he could know more ways to fuse divine inscriptions, he might be able to become a sovereign realm expert. Lin Yi was also a little surprised. After recalling for a while, his expression suddenly became strange. He suddenly remembered that in this world, the stronger the physique, the more divine inscriptions one could fuse. However, Lin Ye's body was completely formed by his divine inscriptions, so he didn't have to worry about his physique. This way, as long as he could comprehend the divine inscriptions, he could fuse them into his body. After understanding this point, Lin Yi glanced at Su Fuwu, whose eyes were filled with hope, and said in a low voice, "Your physique isn't good enough. You can't do this. However, I will think of a way to help you increase your strength." Lin Yi sighed. Maybe my friends are all above the 9 heavens. This area is too weak after all. They don't even have heavenly gods. They probably won't come here. Hearing this, Su Fuwu couldn't help but be disappointed. However, he was immediately shocked by Lin Yi. When did heavenly gods become cabbages? How could they be called weak? Not to mention heavenly gods, there probably weren't many true God realm experts in the 9 prefectures. Forget it, you should comprehend these divine inscriptions first and see how many you can fuse. Seeing that Fan Shiji and the rest hadn't returned yet, Lin Yi had nothing to do, so he decided to help Su Fuwu increase his strength. He picked out 10 or so divine inscriptions that were easy to comprehend for him. Su Fuwu understood Lin Ye's intentions and worked hard to comprehend them. Time slowly passed as he worked hard. 5 days later, Su Fuwu comprehended 2 more types of divine inscriptions. One was a flame and the other was a light shield. Just as he was about to comprehend the 4th type of divine inscriptions, his physique couldn't take it anymore. Although Su Fuwu's foundation was very solid and he had Lin Ye's help, he had just broken through to the divine realm. It was already very rare for him to be able to fuse 3 types of divine inscriptions. Normally, only those at the peak of the God realm would be able to fuse 3 types of divine inscriptions. Even those at the peak of the God realm, who had just entered the God realm, would only be able to comprehend 1 or 2 types of divine inscriptions. It could be said that Su Fuwu's strength had already surpassed the vast majority of people at the peak of the deity realm. Crossing realms to battle was absolutely not a problem. After all, not everyone could have a helper like Lin Yi, who could condense divine runes for you to see at close range. After the cultivation ended, Lin Yi was very satisfied with Su Fuwu's improvement. After all, half a month ago, Su Fuwu was only a half-saint. Now, he was no weaker than an ordinary invincible saint. Of course, in this world, Lin Yi relied on the power of his divine perception and the thousands of divine inscriptions to increase his strength by tens of times. At this time, Fan Shiji and the others finally returned, bringing with them a lot of news. A young man had appeared in the Green Cloud continent. He was still young, but his strength was comparable to that of a divine realm expert. He had stirred up a storm in the Green Cloud continent, and even almost wiped out the orthodoxy that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. In the Ocean continent, a force rose up and took over the orthodoxy and forces of the entire continent with extreme means. Among them, the orthodoxy that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years was destroyed and left the Ocean continent, fleeing to other continents. As for the other 7 continents, including the Fire Python continent, nothing major had happened. However, there were also many strange things. Moreover, almost all the seals of the Forgotten Lands in the 9 continents had loosened. Especially in the Ocean continent, there was no news of the Guardian clan in it. That's right, in the past half a month, Fan Shiji had sensed danger. With the help of the power left behind on the island, he ran around the other 8 continents and looked for the other Guardians. However, there was no news of the Guardian clan in the Ocean continent. The Guardians of the other 7 continents had been contacted. Although there was not much of a problem, their seals had also loosened. They worked together to seal off the 7 passages, and it was much more stable. Of course, sealing off those passages did not mean that Fan Shiji dared to attack Lin Yi and send Lin Yi and the others back. My lord, it seems that the Green Cloud continent is the most suitable candidate for the person you are looking for. By the way, when I came back, I suddenly found a group of ants in the forbidden area, but they had a special aura. I want to ask, are they your subordinates? Fan Shiji carefully reported to Lin Yi, afraid that Lin Yi would attack him if he was dissatisfied. Lin Yi waved his hand and said casually, "You can do whatever you want with those people. It has nothing to do with me. I brought them out. Whether they can survive in this area or not depends on themselves." "Yes, my lord." Fan Shiji's heart trembled, and he could not help but feel lucky. As expected, that group of people was related to Lin Yi. Fortunately, he did not act rashly. There is a problem with all the seals in the forgotten land of the 9 continents. A monstrous youth appeared in the Green Cloud continent, and a mysterious force appeared in the Hylon continent. Could it be that there is someone else like me who came from the forgotten land? Frowning, Lin Yi did not lock up that group of people. His thoughts were in a whirl as he thought about the connection between him and the other 8 continents. No. Absolutely impossible. Although the forgotten land is huge, I have spent so much time investigating all the places, and there is no news of the other powerhouses. Narrowing his eyes, Lin Yi suddenly looked at Su Fuwu and asked in a low voice, "Could there be 9 forgotten land? You are just one of them?" "Impossible," Su Fuwu replied in a low voice. "There is only one forgotten land, and there are indeed 10 passages in it. 9 lead to the 9 continents, and one is a special passage that is rarely seen in 100 years. If that is the case, the problem with the other 8 continents should be inside them, and not the forgotten land. Could it be that someone wants to break open the forgotten land and release all the people sealed inside?" Hearing this, Fan Shiji's expression changed drastically, and he cried out in alarm, "If that is the case, when the people who have been imprisoned inside for a long time come out, their hearts will be filled with hatred, and they will take revenge on the whole world. This is not good, not good. Although their strength is low, that is because of the restrictions between heaven and earth. In such a difficult environment, their talent and willpower will definitely not be weak. If they are allowed to live in the 9 continents, when their strength increases, it may be a disaster." The more he spoke, the more embarrassed Fan Shiji's expression became. Lin Yi glanced at Fan Shiji and was rather surprised. He did not expect this guy to think so far ahead. Yes, if someone brought the people from the forgotten land out, perhaps they would not have much hatred in their hearts. On the contrary, they would be filled with gratitude. However, if the seal of the forgotten land was broken, and they escaped by themselves, then the situation would be different. End of chapter. Chapter 705. "Sir, what do you plan to do next?" Fan Shiji quickly reacted. Lin Yi was still here, so he carefully observed Lin Ye's expression. "Let's go to the Tsangyan continent first and meet that young genius. We'll talk about other things later." Lin Yi glanced at Fan Shiji and said indifferently, "What do you want to do?" Fan Shiji really wanted to go to the other 8 continents to carefully investigate the seal, but on second thought, his own strength was too weak. If he could protect Lin Ye's thigh, perhaps he could suppress the matter of the seal. From Lin Ye's attitude towards the people who came out of the forgotten land, Fan Shiji could see that Lin Yi did not have much affection for the forgotten land. Thinking of this, Fan Shiji immediately knelt down on one knee and said in a low voice, "I only want to follow Sir. If you want to follow me, I'll naturally give you the chance." Nodding slightly, Lin Yi said indifferently, "Give the order to continue investigating the other continents. Once you find a young genius, inform me immediately. Come with me to the Tsangyan continent first. After seeing that young man, I'll help you solve the problem of the passage." In fact, the reason why Lin Yi helped Fan Shiji solve the problem of the passage was not because of Fan Shiji, but because he had a premonition deep in his heart. If the seal of the forgotten land was broken, perhaps what happened in this world would affect the continent he was in. That was why Lin Yi chose to make his move and nip all the dangers in the bud. "Before that, I'll increase your strength first." Glancing at Fan Shiji, Lin Yi immediately summoned several divine inscriptions and condensed them in the air. It had to be said that Lin Yi had too many divine inscriptions. When Fan Shiji saw them, he was shocked, even more so than Su Fuwu. Su Fuwu had already seen Lin Ye's monstrous talent, but this was his first time seeing it. So many divine inscriptions. Gulp. The sound of saliva swallowing could be heard. Fan Shiji's face was full of disbelief. He could not help but pinch himself. It was extremely painful, but it also made him understand that what was happening in front of him was real. It wasn't an illusion. This level of strength seems to have already surpassed that of a heavenly god. For a moment, Fan Shiji no longer dared to have any disrespect or other thoughts towards Lin Yi. Try and see how many types of power you can comprehend. Once you're done, we'll set off. Lin Ye's expression was indifferent. Su Fuwu, continue to consolidate your strength. Yes, sir. Hearing Lin Ye's words, Su Fuwu hurriedly agreed. Fan Shiji woke up and knelt on the ground with a bang. He kowtowed several times to Lin Yi. Thank you, my lord. I will work hard to comprehend it and serve you in the future. Under the huge temptation of increasing his strength, Fan Shiji completely threw everything to the back of his mind. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to follow Lin Yi and serve Lin Yi loyally. The corners of Su Fuwu's mouth couldn't help but twitch when he saw this scene. In this way, he didn't have much of an advantage. Moreover, with someone competing with him, the benefits he could obtain in the future would be greatly reduced. However, Su Fuwu didn't dare to say too much. He knew that Lin Yi had many things to do and needed sufficient manpower. However, he was nervous in his heart. After expressing his gratitude, Fan Shiji didn't hesitate and started to comprehend the power of the divine patterns in the air. One had to admit that although Su Fuwu's talent was strong, he didn't grow up in this world after all. The divine patterns had a repulsive force to him. Fan Shiji comprehended 3 types of divine patterns in a mere 3 days. Adding to the ones he comprehended previously, he had already comprehended 4 types. This kind of talent wasn't considered weak in the 9 continents. How many true God-level existences had only comprehended 1 type of divine pattern? Those who could fuse 9 types of divine patterns were all recorded in the books as outstanding experts who suppressed an era. After completely fusing 3 types of divine patterns, Fan Shiji's strength also rose to the late true God level. His strength wasn't inferior to an ordinary peak true God. Shortly after, Fan Shiji led the way in front, bringing Lin Yi and Su Fuwu towards the Blue Cloud continent. Violet Rainbow Island wasn't considered weak in the Fireworm continent. With Fan Shiji leading the way, there were no obstructions. They directly passed through the teleportation array and crossed over to the Blue Cloud continent, which was tens of millions of miles away. After all, Fan Shiji's previous news was from a few days ago. After Lin Yi and the other 2 arrived at the Blue Cloud continent, they didn't directly search for traces of the youth. Instead, they went to the city's restaurants to inquire about the news. In this world, a restaurant was a rare thing. The food inside was made from the meat of all kinds of prehistoric demonic beasts. The wine was brewed by advanced cultivators, which could improve the physique of cultivators. The most important aspect of comprehending divine patterns was the strength of one's physique. Hence, almost every restaurant had countless cultivators patronizing it. It could be said that business was booming. Noticing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but rub his nose. He had an idea in his heart. The things that this restaurant provided weren't rare. Any disciple in Cebu Gakuen could enjoy them. However, the people from the other forces wouldn't be so lucky. After all, not everyone was as rich as Cebu Gakuen. If he could move the restaurant over and operate it in the various cities, it might become popular. Of course, the most important thing in establishing a restaurant wasn't to make money, but to gather information. With so many cultivators gathered together, the topics they talked about were definitely not trivial matters. Instead, they talked about various things that happened among cultivators, either exploring ruins, strange things, or some gossip. Everyone knew about the Theta Scarabii. Linking them together, it was a complete information network. After understanding this point, Lin Ye's breathing became hurried. If he could establish an information network in the Tianlan True Dominion as soon as possible, everything that happened in the Tianlan True Dominion would be under his control. As expected, Lin Yi and the other two only stayed in the restaurant for 2 hours before they obtained the information they wanted. 3 days later, the young man who had suppressed the entire Azure Cloud continent would challenge the number one orthodoxy in the Azure Cloud continent, the Heaven's Gate. It was said that the young man's fiancée had died at the hands of a Heaven's Gate disciple. His own sect had also been forced by the Heaven's Gate. A few years ago, the young man had been suppressed by the Heaven's Gate. He had left his own sect and this continent to cultivate desperately. Finally, his strength had increased. He wanted to seek revenge from the Heaven's Gate. After hearing this news, Fan Shiji wanted to leave. However, he was stopped by Lin Yi and continued to stay in the restaurant to listen to the news. Perhaps the young man's fame was too great, so it took a long time for people to talk about other things. However, most of them were about the destruction of sects or the mysterious appearance of unknown expert. Then there were the ruins. There was no news about the other young geniuses that Lin Yi wanted to know. On the contrary, there was a lot of gossip about the young man. End of chapter. Chapter 706. Rumor had it that in the past few decades, the young man had painstakingly cultivated and finally met a confidant. Unexpectedly, that woman was the daughter of an elder in the Elysium. Now that the matter had been exposed, that woman was summoned back by the sect and forced to marry the genius disciples of other sections. After hearing this news, Lin Yi was almost certain that the young man was a native of this world. How long had they been in this world? How could so many things have happened? This made Lin Yi rather disappointed. He did not expect that with the strength of Purple Rainbow Island, they could not find any useful information. Could it be that the people who came with him all went to the so-called Beyond the Nine Heavens? That teleportation array was definitely not wrong. Lin Yi, Qin Yue Yin, and the others were definitely teleported to a world. Although Biluo was not there and could not be contacted, Lin Yi was sure that this was not an illusion. It seems that I can only find the way to the Beyond the Nine Heavens. Narrowing his eyes, Lin Yi had already made up his mind. After staying for a while, Lin Yi did not find any information about the Beyond the Nine Heavens. He was too lazy to stay any longer and immediately left the restaurant. Although that young man was not from the continent of Lin Yi still wanted to go to the Elysium. After all, the Elysium was the number one orthodoxy in the Azure Cloud state. If he wanted to go to the Beyond the Nine Heavens, he had to get clues from them. Ordinary people did not even know what the Beyond the Nine Heavens was. As for the seat of the Elysium, it was even easier. He could get the answer by asking anyone. At the peak of Sky Mountain, the number one orthodoxy in the Azure Cloud state, the Elysium. According to legend, in the depths of Sky Mountain, there was a heavenly palace hidden. Of course, no one knew if this heavenly palace really existed. 3 days later, at the bottom of Sky Mountain, Lin Yi and the other two wore bamboo hats and sat on a bamboo raft, fishing. Since he knew that the young man was not from the divine continent, Lin Yi was not in a hurry. He wanted to see what kind of power the high-end combat power of this world could unleash. He leisurely fished at the bottom of Sky Mountain, waiting for the battle between the young man and the Elysium. They were not the only ones. Over the past 3 days, tens of thousands of cultivators had rushed over from afar and gathered around Sky Mountain, waiting for the show to begin. The Heavenly Gate was an orthodoxy that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years in the Azure Cloud continent. Everyone was curious about their background and wanted to see what kind of strength the Heavenly Gate had. Very quickly, the entire Heavenly Mountain was occupied by cultivators. Almost every mountain peak and even the mountain range was filled with people. What was even more laughable was that outside the gate of heaven, some people were even lying in front of the guards, waiting for the arrival of the young man. The guards didn't know whether to chase them or not, so they had no choice but to close the door. On the bamboo raft, Fan Shiji could not help but feel helpless as he looked at the figures that covered the mountains and plains. Isn't it just challenging a mountain gate? Is there a need for so many people to come? By the way, sir, are you sure you don't want to go up and take a look? If we're any later, there will be too many people and we won't be able to go up. Fan Shiji looked at Lin Yi in confusion. In his opinion, Lin Ye's strength was exceedingly high, and there was no need for him to do this. If I want to know what's going on up there, why should I go up there? Lin Yi shook his head slightly and shushed Fan Shiji. He did not want Fan Shiji to say anything more and just fish in peace. Fan Shiji had no choice but to fish while sizing up the heavenly gate. His goal was to explore the seal of the Forgotten Land, and he only hoped that the matter here could be resolved quickly. At the same time, at the peak of Heavenly Mountain, the interior of the Heavenly Gate was filled with festive settings. All the elders were gathered in the main hall. One of them had a white beard, but the skin on his face was very clean. The aura in his body was surging, and several divine runes appeared on his body. Damn it! This brat did this, he's simply courting death. Now that so many cultivators have gathered here, if we drive them away forcefully, perhaps public opinion will be disadvantageous to us. Another elder sighed and said, Our heavenly gate is no longer what it used to be, and with the existence of that person, we have to keep a low profile. If they want to come, then let them come. If that brat Yi Feng really comes, I'll skin him alive. Another elder said angrily, He deceived my daughter and dares to cause trouble on the wedding day. Phew, I wonder if the people from the Flying Feather sect will dare to come and fetch the bride? With such a big lineup, I don't think they'll dare to come. An elder sighed and said, Sect Master, what should we do today? As his voice sounded out, all of the elders turned their gazes towards the person in the middle. The elder raised his eyebrows slightly and glanced at the crowd. He said softly, It's just a child, do you have to be so flustered? Hearing this, many of the elders could not help but look embarrassed. Although it was a child, Yi Feng's strength had already surpassed theirs. Of course, the sect master of the Heavenly Gate was still much stronger than Yi Feng. Wait until noon, when the Heavenly Gate opens, set up the scene, play the joyous music, and wait for the people from the Flying Feather sect to come and fetch the bride. If they don't come, send someone to destroy them in a few days. His voice was filled with a biting chill. Yes, many of the elders felt a chill in their hearts. They did not dare to resist and stood quietly on the spot, waiting for the time to come. A moment later, the scorching sun hung high in the sky. Several elders stood up and left the hall, instructing everyone to set up the scene in the Heavenly Gate. Not long after, the sound of joyous music rang out. The gate opened and a red carpet rolled down the mountain path, spreading all the way to the foot of the mountain. Seeing the red carpet, many of the cultivators who came to watch the show were shocked. They did not dare to believe that the Heavenly Gate dared to continue the wedding at this time. I heard that although Yi Feng is young, he is already a peak true God realm expert and has comprehended 6 or 7 types of divine inscriptions. His strength is extraordinary. At this time, the Heavenly Gate still dares to continue the wedding. Are they trying to provoke Yi Feng? There is already a deep hatred between the two sides, so what's there to provoke? This time, I'm afraid the Heavenly Gate will be in big trouble. A crazy Yi Feng, I'm afraid they can't handle it. However, although the wedding is going on, will the people from the Flying Feather sect dare to come? At this point, the crowd could not help but hesitate. Yes, would the people from the Flying Feather sect dare to come? However, regardless of whether the people from the Flying Feather sect dared to come, all the cultivators avoided the red carpet. No one dared to walk on it. Yi Feng dared to provoke the Heavenly Gate, but it did not mean that they dared to do so. Unless Yi Feng could defeat the Heavenly Gate, they would not dare to be disrespectful to the Heavenly Gate. Otherwise, they would at most come to watch the show. As the joyous music reverberated, everyone's gaze turned to the Heavenly Gate. Rumble! Bang! Bang! Suddenly, the heavenly mountain shook violently. A thunderous sound kept reverberating in everyone's ears. Everyone raised their heads and looked in the direction of the sound. Their pupils constricted. The sound of cold air being sucked in rose and fell, echoing between heaven and earth. End of chapter. Chapter 707. Boom, boom, boom. Sky Mountain trembled as the rumbling continued. Everyone turned around to look, and all of them sucked in a cold breath. A gigantic bronze coffin appeared on the horizon and was heading towards Sky Mountain. With every step he took, Sky Mountain would tremble. A crack would appear on the plain. Gasp! Oh my God, how can a coffin move on its own? Is he stupid? There's someone under the coffin. How dare he bring a coffin to Sky Mountain? Could the person under the coffin be Yi Feng? Oh my God, Yi Feng is here. He's really here. No wonder he's an elite at the peak of the true God realm. He's not even afraid of the Sky Gate. Instantly, everyone sighed and took a few steps back. No matter how powerful Yi Feng was, at least he had done something that no one would dare to do. On the bamboo raft, Lin Ye's state of mind was also broken. He looked over curiously. Following his gaze, he could vaguely see a skinny figure under the bronze coffin. He was dragging the coffin and walking towards Sky Mountain step by step. With every step he took, the mountain shook. Even the river that Lin Yi and the other two were in was shaking violently, interrupting their fishing. Phew! How troublesome! With a sigh, Lin Yi waved his right hand. In an instant, a sky full of divine inscriptions surged out from his body and disappeared into the water. Then, the power of the divine inscriptions blossomed and stabilized the entire river. It no longer trembled. As for Sky Mountain, Lin Yi did not protect it. He wanted to watch a good show. Why would he act so early? However, even this was beyond Fan Shiji and Su Fuwu's imagination. They were incomparably shocked as they stared blankly at Lin Yi. Boom, boom, boom. Yi Feng carried the bronze coffin with both hands and walked towards Sky Mountain. In a few breaths' time, he was in front of the red carpet. Ha! With a soft shout, Yi Feng exerted strength in his arms and suddenly threw the bronze coffin into the air. He adjusted the direction of the coffin and stepped on the red carpet with his right foot. Boom! The bronze coffin fell, but it was caught by Yi Feng with one hand. He waved it a few times, bringing about a cold gust of wind. Hiss! That bronze coffin is capable of causing the entire mountain range to tremble. It must weigh several tens of thousands of pounds. It's already shocking that Yi Feng can carry it. And now you're using it as a weapon? Heavens, just how powerful are Yi Feng's arms? Look at his hands, they seem to be flashing with divine power runes. To be able to cultivate the divine force runes to such a level, it's truly terrifying. Phew, the divine power rune that I cultivate can only lift things that weigh 1,000 kilograms. Seeing this scene before their eyes, everyone was incomparably horrified. They immediately had a clear understanding of Yi Feng's strength. However, when Yi Feng stepped onto the red carpet, a thunderous roar exploded from within the gate of heaven. Who dares to ruin the Elysium's plans? As soon as he finished speaking, dark clouds gathered in the sky, and many divine runes appeared. Crackle, crackle. Thunder rumbled. Dozens of sharp attacks, including cold winds and sharp flaming blades, were mixed in with the thunder and lightning as they slashed toward Yi Feng. The violent power wreaked havoc, and in an instant, the entire area fell silent. Ha! However, before these attacks could land, Yi Feng had already waved the bronze coffin to meet the attacks. In front of everyone's horrified eyes, the bronze coffin collided with the attacks. Everyone could not help but close their eyes, not daring to look. Buzz! The expected loud noise did not appear. Everyone was shocked, but when they opened their eyes to take a look, they were stunned. They saw that the bronze coffin was emitting a strange light, absorbing all the attacks. Yifeng's expression did not change at all. He continued to wave the bronze coffin, stepped on the red carpet, and walked along the mountain range toward the peak of Sky Mountain. Boom! The thunderous sound was heard again. This time, the divine runes turned into several ferocious tigers. They roared, waved their sharp claws, and pounced on Yifeng, who was walking in the mountain range. Awoo! Boom! 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 The giant tigers that were formed by the divine runes were extremely ferocious. As they waved their claws, they created a strong wind, causing a strong wind to blow. The trees on the mountain range were blown away. Some of the weaker spectators could not withstand the force. They could only cling tightly to the stone walls and other objects to hang on to the mountain range. Buzz. However, no matter how powerful the giant tigers were, when they came into contact with the bronze coffin, they were absorbed again. They did not cause any harm to Yifeng. That bronze coffin is a treasure. Oh my God, what kind of treasure is that? It can even absorb such powerful attacks and come out unscathed. At this time, the spectators stared at the bronze coffin, their eyes full of greed. Not only them, but Lin Yi, who was in the lake, was also shocked. Even he felt some pressure from the previous attack. He did not expect the bronze coffin to absorb them so easily. It seems that the bronze coffin is not of a low grade. It is at least an upper grade supreme sacred artifact. It is similar to my sky-devouring mirror. However, it is too big, and it is a little troublesome to carry around. Lin Yi touched his nose and did not say anything. He continued to watch. The people from Heaven's Gate did not seem to believe in heresy. Many divine runes appeared continuously, and various attacks fell. However, they were all absorbed by the bronze coffin. What was more shocking was that after so many attacks were absorbed, the bronze coffin did not change at all. No one knew how powerful it was. The people from Heaven's Gate were also shocked. They stopped attacking and waited silently for Yifeng to step into the mountain range. Is Heaven's Gate admitting defeat? TSK, it seems that a good show is about to begin. I wonder if Yifeng is more powerful, or if Heaven's Gate, which has been passed down for 10,000 years, is more powerful. Yifeng is really ferocious. He actually managed to do this all by himself. However, why do I feel that he is still lacking if he wants to go against the entire Heaven's Gate? Indeed, Heaven's Gate is a sect that has been passed down for 10,000 years. They must have a protective array and many hidden cards. It is said that the previous leader of Heaven's Gate is not dead. He is only in seclusion. What? The previous leader is not dead? I heard that he was already at the peak of the true God realm a few hundred years ago and had merged the power of 7 divine runes. If he is not dead, then how powerful would he be now? Therefore, it is still unknown whether Yifeng can defeat Heaven's Gate. However, it is already very impressive that he can do this. He is so young, and he already has such power. If he is allowed to cultivate for a few more days, I am afraid that there are not many people in Jiuzhou who can defeat him. Baidu search 81 Chinese Websidio. No advertising message. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.